Good afternoon and welcome to this special council meeting of Thursday, January 9th, 2025. Just before we call the meeting to order, I just wanted to take a moment to extend council and staff's heartfelt condolences and support to the Hancock family who suffered a tragic and unexpected loss yesterday. Our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family, Wayne, so all the best and take care. With that, we'll call the meeting to order at 1 p.m. this afternoon. I'll begin with the land acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that the Township of Cabin-Monaghan is located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory in the traditional territory of the Mississauga Anishinaabe people. We offer our gratitude to First Nations for their care for and teachings about these lands. May we honor these teachings. I'll look to council for approval of the agenda. Moved by Councillor Burns, seconded by Councillor Nachoff. All in favor? That is approved. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, there is no closed session, so we'll begin with 6.1. Our first presentation from the Cabin-Monaghan Public Library Board budget, Carla Buckborough and Earl McLeod. And before we get started, I think council, you've all received these packages, so we just need a motion to receive the updated presentation. With that, those documents are the ones that are just in front of you. Can I get a motion? Moved by Councillor Nachoff, seconded by Councillor Byrne. All in favor? That is approved. Okay, Carla, over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Graham. And hello, councillors. It's always interesting to come to council for the budget presentation. If you want to get it started, thank you. We've had an awesome year in the library. We've had so many things going on in 2024 that we are hoping to continue on and grow from in 2025. If we can go to the next page. We had our book launch, which I had the book with me last time, and I see that it's out on the table for people to look at. It was a very fun project. We applied for and received a second Seniors Community Grant. We took part in activities at the CMCC, Zucchini Fest, the BIA Fall Festival, the Volunteer Fair. We've created connections with the story time up at the CMCC during the summer camp. Staff have gone to Helping Hands and Compass Daycares to do story times. We have our continued adult story time, a partnership with Caris Homes and Centennial Place. And we have reorganized the Millbrook branch and turned the Harry Williams Room into a dedicated children's space. Now, thanks to the township, we have been using the Dorothy Stevens Room upstairs for some of our senior activities using the lift, because with the Harry Williams Room now being the children's room, we can't use that one for our activities. So we appreciate the use of the Dorothy Stevens Room. We are sharing it with the Early On Center, and everything seems to be going well with that. As this slide says, connect. I really like to highlight that while we don't realize we're making a difference, one of our participants said that this senior grant project saved her life, that it got her out of her house where she had been sitting alone and just was unsure what to do with herself. And so this has brought her out into the community, and she comes to a lot of the activities we're having. The next slide. In 2024, up until December 21st, as I put this presentation together for the week before Christmas, we had by that point welcomed 376 new patrons, circulated 53,000 items, that's 6.6% more than in 2023. And we had 5,938 participants in our programs, a 41% increase over 2023. And a lot of these, that's not 5,000 individual different people, they are repeat customers, but it's amazing to see how busy the library is these days. Next one. The next three slides are just a few graphics that show the growth in how the library is being used in terms of the collection. This one shows the physical materials. We are on track to circulate about 31,000. I checked the number yesterday and didn't quite make that, 30,980, but pretty close to what I had estimated. The next one shows our virtual branch, and you can see the growth year over year as we started it in we've been using this since 2012, but using the statistics from 2020 up until December 21st, 2024. You can see how circulation has been increasing. And the third slide coming shows graph of the physical items and the virtual branch. and our total circulation, where I had said we would be doing about 53,000, that shows that combined total. Last year, I'm not sure if you remember, I was at the budget presentation on, I think it was January 21st, and we were having a photo shoot done at the library. And so just to point out, some of these photos that you are seeing in these presentations, like that one, are part of the photo shoot that we had. It's wonderful having this bank of photos that we can pull from that are showing people using the library. Grants are important to the library. This shows the ones that I applied for in 2024. And for 2025, I've already applied for students under the Canada Summer Jobs Grant and the Ontario Summer Employment Opportunity Program. And in the next week, I will complete the application for the Young Canada Works program, as well as our third Seniors Community Grant. The board has asked me to create a calendar of grants, opportunities, and deadlines, and that is a project that I have underway. Our vision, mission, and guiding values are important to us, and so that we don't lose sight of them, the vision and mission statements are on the library agenda at each of our meetings, as well as on the minutes. And so they become part of your package as well, that you can see what it is that we are striving to do. The next slide shows our strategic directions, 1, 2, and 3, the goals that we had set. In January, the meeting will be focused, the library board meeting will be focused on renewing what we have done and where we need to head with this strategic plan for the next year. As we move into the budget information, there's very little change from our first submission to our second. This slide has so much text on it. It gives a quick synopsis of what the requested funds are for. We are asking for a 4.1% increase in our operating levy. The increase is because of increases cost of living for salaries, as well as a single progression on the grid for staff that have had performance appraisals. The operating expenses are increased by $3,000 in software licenses and due to the growing usage of the virtual branch, which was evidenced in that pink graph that I showed on the previous slides. In the capital budget levy request, at our last meeting, or the first budget submission, Mayor Graham had talked about changing the request a little bit, looking into development charges. And so I have requesting the same amount of money, $3,000 for spending, but I have changed it and asking for an increase from $6,500 to $8,000 in development charges. As you can see, the library is growing, usage is growing. These are items that we do have marked in development charges, and so they are allowable expenses that way. When it comes to the other portion of our levy, our budget levy has mainly two parts: circulating materials and IT investment. I had hoped to have spent the money from 2024 in 2024 on IT investment. The new page that was added to your package, if you want to go to the next one, gives an IT investment update. I have been working with the county on trying to bring our IT services up to a standard that they would like us to be at in case they take over support of our IT services, same as they do here at the township. They provided us with a very big document back in November 2023 that had some rather large price tags associated with it. Some of them are things that we are not going to find necessary, such as a server, because we are moving our accounting system to cloud-based. But some of the other things are cybersecurity. We haven't been running anything other than Windows Defender in the library, and some of the board members see this as an issue. So I've been in contact with the county to find out what software they use, same one that they use here at the township. And so I've been in negotiations with the company that provides that, the Canadian reseller. Everything takes a little bit of time. The quotes finally came to me on December 30th in the afternoon. So there was no time to act on that. I didn't want to spend money before that without knowing what the quotes would be. So I'm going to be rolling forward the money. I've shown here where the money is to be spent, proposing that the 6,100 that wasn't spent in 2024 will be used towards buying 1 year of the antivirus cybersecurity software at about $3,000 and 3 public access computers at $3,000 or at $1,000 a unit. The 6,000 that I'm asking for in the 2025 budget would be allocated to purchasing 3 more public access computers. And then one of the things pointed out in the county IT was the fact that staff computers are running Windows 11 Home Edition, and the county would like to see that up to Windows 11 Pro. I might be budgeting a little bit high on that at $300 a license. That would be to buy a full version of Windows 11 Pro at $259.99 plus tax. Upgrade versions are available for lesser amounts, but I have to make sure that they come with a reusable license so that if we have to reinstall Windows on the computer, that it can be used again as opposed to just disappearing and having to buy the license again. So I'm working through those. So that is where the monies would be spent. The next pages are almost unchanged from when I presented them at the first budget meeting. They are just essentially a written out explanation of what I've been saying. New in this package, though, is page 3 here. What was circulated in my first budget presentation, or not the first budget, but the first, the one that was in the package is supposed to be for today. The boxes that the arrows point to didn't come through for some reason. So I have replaced the page with these ones that does have the explanations on what the different monies from our donation or from our reserves have been used for. The next page is just a summary of our operating expenses. And that's the end.
Thanks for that presentation and those additional documents, Carla. I think it's a really transparent and a lot of justification in there. So excellent job. Questions, members of council? Councilor Hunt, or Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Thank you, Mayor, and through you, Carla. A great presentation this year. I really appreciate the clarity and the transparency of how things are flowing. So thank you very much for that. A couple questions for you. One being the I think it's 1,500s on the development charges. I'm unclear of the mechanics of that. Are you asking for development charges to be allotted to you, or do you have a capital project that you're looking for development charges to be applied to? That's my first question. My second question is with regard to the cybersecurity, is if the county has cybersecurity for the IT environment the county supports, which theoretically would be your library in the future, why wouldn't you just use an extension of what the county's already doing rather than going out getting it yourself? Thank you.
I think on the second, Ms. Pope might be able to provide some clarity on that, Carla. And if you want to think about number 1 for a little bit, I'll go to Ms. Pope first.
I can provide clarification on both. The DC's library is included in our calculations. They do have access. They just have to prove that there is an expansion to be able to use those funds. And because the circulating materials in first draft was at 23,500 and they were only asking for 6,500, that's why Mayor Graham had recommended to increase the DCs, therefore reducing the impact on the tax rate. So that's the first part of the DC question. The second part with the County of Peterborough, just in conversations, they're not prepared to just add the library because it has to be brought up to a standard, and that's part of that report from 2023. So any conversations that Carla is having with the county is independent, trying to work towards that. We should refer back to the county if we're going to ask for explanation as to why they're proposing something one way or another. I'm not directly involved in those conversations, so I just don't want to speak on their behalf.
Yeah, and the county came in and did a sort of what I'd call an audit, so to speak, as to what the requirements would be or the preferences would be. And I think Carla's been over the last probably just over a year navigating that document and those recommendations to sort of develop some sort of critical path as to, okay, realistically and under the budget constraints that the library has, how can we incrementally make improvements towards that are necessary regardless of what the outcome is? But in order for the county to take on the extension of that service as they do for the municipality in certain capacities, they won't until you have a standpoint, and there's not necessarily justifications therein in that document. It's just all of the requirements that you'll need to get in with us. But you're more versed in this sort of technical stuff than I am, Deputy Mayor, so I'm sure you know. Other questions for Carla? Carla, did you want to say anything to that or that? Okay, fair enough. Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair, so on that subject of the DC charges, does that 1,500 put you at your limit? And I'm guessing that whatever you take out of that fund, whatever the DC fund might be, that would be less for the township to use on other things that are new.
So libraries, DCs are very regulated. There's an entire act about what you can accumulate DCs for. And then that act is what informs your DC bylaw. And so in order for certain things to be accumulate DCs for, they have to be identified in that bylaw. And so when it comes to the library, there's certain amenities, whether it's circulation materials or subscription materials for new services, those sorts of things are eligible. And so it's really just a matter of, it's not like they get accumulated and get isolated for the library. So the library has an account with DCs for what DC eligible things are for. And what we're working with the board and Carla on is sort of understanding and justifying or creating maybe even a formula as to what percentage of increase year over year, rather than just a blanket, flat rate amount. If we're demonstrating growth, that, we can afford to pay for new subscriptions and additional materials from the DCs because they're eligible, and that there's a general amount identified that we've accumulated in the DC bylaw for the library. So it's a separate account for the DC amount. It's in the reserve report in that total document where you can see what for the DC reserves, there's an isolated amount that's for library purposes, just like there is for other amenities within the DC bylaw. Ms. Pope, did you want to correct or clarify anything on that? Does that answer your question, Councilor Burns? Sorry.
Through the chair, no, I was looking also to see if there's an upper limit. This 1,500 that's being asked for now. I didn't know whether that is a problem. The other thing I was going to ask, because I don't know, you're going to save some cost by getting rid of servers. I'm assuming that there's a cost for the cloud, and I don't know where that falls into.
So currently we've been using the same accounting software that the township used to use, Keystone, and the yearly service fee that we've been paying to run Keystone, we will be using to cover the cost of using QuickBooks in the cloud. So we are doing a complete change of software for the library because Diamond that the township is using is far more substantial than what the library needs for our accounting services. I have talked with the auditors. We've had a brief discussion with Ms. Pope. So this is an okay way to go. The computer that the county called a server is actually just an old PC that is running the Keystone server software. It wasn't actually an actual server. I don't know that if we had stayed on with Keystone that we would have looked at upgrading to a server because again, we don't need something that robust. Through Mayor Graham to Councillor Byrne, about the DC charges, there's about $30,000 a year that's actually set aside for the library for collection services. The problem, though, is trying to figure out how to determine what growth is. Some municipalities and libraries use just the increase in number of residents in the township, in the municipality as the formula. Others, it's the number of books that are added as an increase in the growing collection. Others, it's a number of new patrons added. And so every library is using a different formula system, even though a lot of them, the development charge study has been done by the same company. There's no one formula that anywhere is using. So we have a lot of space in the development charges. And correct me if I'm wrong, but if we don't pull from it, that then builds into the next time the DC study is used and lowers the amount that can be requested.
Ms. Pope, you might want to clarify some of that information.
So you're correct. In 2023, there's approximately $30,000, but it's based on the actual DCs that are issued. They have a component of the total fee that comes in. So it's not going to be guaranteed 30,000. It depends on the DCs issued in the year. They are set aside for the library for particular uses by the library that are growth related. So proving that growth related portion is really what they have to do in order to pull down from that. So you can't just replace the current circulation, they need to grow. So that's where she's talking about the metrics that they're looking at to see what they can prove their growth at. You're never taking from any other DC reserve. That's not the point of it. It comes directly from theirs. As far as spending, it's really about your capital threshold. So they need to invest. So whether they're spending their own funds or they're spending DC funds, they need to invest. And then that investment is looked at over a 10-year period, and then you're allowed to set your DCs for the next cycle based on that. So if you spend 10 years and don't spend any money on any kind of capital investment, whether it be the circulation materials or IT infrastructure, then there would be no funds eligible to be submitted in the next round of the DC charges because they didn't do any investment. So pulling down those funds to make sure those investments happen are important.
Follow-up?
Through the chair, yeah, there's a whole lot of follow-ups to that. If they don't use it in that 10-year cycle, what happens to that money? Right, let's go with that.
The money stays for the purpose that it was originally raised. So it would stay there. We're just talking about the next cycle. So if you had DC charges, you wouldn't be able to charge. If you did nothing, you wouldn't be able to charge for anything until you started doing something. So there'd be no new money coming in, but they'd still have that reserve to pull down on. It doesn't disappear.
Through the chair on that subject then, Carla was trying to, if we didn't use it now, there might be a reduction in what they could pull from. Is there any restrictions on, do they have to use their own monies first before they're eligible to spend money out of the DC fund that's sitting there?
Yeah, I think, I understand the approach, but it's actually kind of inverted. You need to just show justification why it's growth. Like you can't spend it on non-growth related materials. That's what development charges are for. So you can't, it's not free. It's very restricted in the covenant. So that's why, to Kimberly's point, what if you don't utilize it to offset the costs and impacts of growth? They assume you were wrong when you did your previous bylaw. And so you don't get to go to the well again until you've utilized what you accumulated under the previous bylaw period, right? So you need to, what I think we still can work on a bit further is exactly, and Carla's right, there, unfortunately, with all the legislation around DCs for the libraries, there isn't a formula for what or how much or what or to use your term, like a cap. There isn't any direction, but what there is a requirement of that the auditors will be looking for is if you're increasing the amount of DCs you're utilizing, you have to have justification that it's growth that's requiring the use of those monies. So it's kind of like, it's not, you can spend all this amount. It's, you need to, every dollar of the DC monies that you spend, you need to demonstrate why you can spend it because it's a byproduct of the growth that your community's facing. That's what you've accumulated it from. Does that make sense at all? Other questions? Deputy Mayor Huntley?
Through Chair, I guess in that logic, then I think, the growth of additional public use computers would qualify as DC, would they not? Like, well, wouldn't that be growth? So why wouldn't you be able to apply DC charges to that as well?
I think the issue with that is they would have to be additional computers, not it's replacement. So what those that are new additional and not replacements, there's a portion of those that would be eligible. But if they're replacing, there's none of that money is accessible. So Carla, I'll let you know they're not. Yeah. So that's being on the board. I know that. That's why. Sorry. Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair, in that determination, then when you spend something, hoping that it's gonna draw in more customers, for the lack of a better expression. The same with your upgrade to a newer computer because it's enhancing what you're offering to our new residents or our bigger community. Can that not be justified somehow as growth? And when you spend that money, if you didn't spend DC charges, but you increase the flow of people in and out of the service, whether it's virtual or in-house, does that not justify the earlier expenses that we paid out of pocket from your budget?
You would think, and unfortunately, the act is very restrictive on what it can be spent on. So you can't, like, it's not and that's where you do have, the only flexibility you have is on how you want to calculate what you can pull from your DC allocation. So if Carla and the board were to establish a formula that used, whether it's, population increases, I mean, that's kind of an arbitrary one that I think if you're going to go with a massive increase in your DCs, just saying the population is increasing, so we're increasing, isn't exactly demonstrating growth in the library service. So what you need to do, and it's very restrictive on, is demonstrate why this investment is new growth related. And unfortunately, just like it is in the municipality, when we're replacing machines, that's not DC eligible, even though the wear and tear has potentially increased because more houses, like if it's a plow, for instance, and there's more roads that they're plowing, well, there's more wear on that machine, but it's an existing machine, so it's not DC eligible. And it's the same sort of logic, like you would think it could, but it can't. Councilor Byrne, and then go to Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through the chair, just on that topic then. So this is the first time we're using this DC charges, no? Okay, so it's not like we missed out on an opportunity prior to.
The library this year is increasing, even from the first draft, right? We're increasing it by an extra 1,500 because we believe there's justification in the CERC materials, both online and in print, that demonstrate or justify in increasing that amount. So it's not coming off the levy because that's specifically DC eligible stuff. Deputy Mayor? Other questions for Carla? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, I was just curious where you are now with the hours of operations for the two libraries and how that fits in, because the biggest lion's share of the budget is wages. And for the people I talk to, that's the concern. So I'm just wondering how that's changed going forward. Are we increasing the amount of hours or are we still decreasing somewhat?
Through your chair to Councillor Byrne. The library has not decreased hours since 2012. We have maintained or even increased the hours. We have a complement of 4 full-time, or like an equivalent of 4 full-time people that is spread out over a staff of 7. Not quite sure how to answer that. We don't have any plans to contract now. We realize that in the article that went in the Millbrook Times, it said that Saturdays at the library in Millbrook would be 2 Saturdays a month. That's actually a specific activity with Rebecca from 11 till 12. That is 2 Saturdays a month. Millbrook is still open every Saturday.
Thanks for that, Carla. Other questions? If not, oh, sorry, Carla, go for it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Byrne. Did that answer the question? That, as I say, we have 4 full-time equivalents spread out over 7 people. We are currently open, I think it's just over 50 hours between the 2 branches each week. We do have a mandate that we do not work alone, which does mean that I have 2 people on at all times. There are a few spots where there are holes in the schedules where that can't happen, and we are filling that with volunteers.
Thanks, Carla. Seeing no other questions, would look for a motion to receive the capital and operating 2025 request from the Cape Public Library, received for information. Moved by Councillor Byrne, second by Councillor Natchop. All in favor? That is approved. Thanks very much, Carla and Earl, for joining us today and for that great presentation. Next is a presentation from the Deputy Mayor with regards to the Millbrook Downtown BIA Board of Management. What do you, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Chair. I didn't realize I was supposed to prepare something for the, but is the sheet up or no? Okay, then I'll just talk to it. So the BIA Board of Management is looking to increase their levy of this year about 12%. So about equivalent to about $2,000 for the course of their budget. This is because they're trying to catch up for the actual operating expenses of the BIA. Hosting the events, running all of the different downtown features and things like that that they do run are over and above what you consider operating. And because the levy had been sitting at a fixed rate for about 20 years, it was a little behind. So rather than execute a one time, let's bring it up to our current, theoretically what economic adjustment would bring it to, we're slowly bringing it up to try to ease the impact, try to get it back in line to where it should be. Any questions? Feel free.
So just for clarity then, because this is a catch up, so the board has approved this 12% or so and change interest, and that, like, just from a council standpoint, that's the purview of the board, the BIA, you know, it's just more for information for our purposes, and the board's approved that, correct?
Through your chair, to you, Chair. Yes, so the board did present it at their AGM, presented it to the participants who were there that night, and the general consensus was that, you know, everybody understood that, you know, in order to continue operating, that they had to basically take a bit of a pay or a levy increase on that. Thank you.
Questions? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, if, from what I listened to, it makes it sound like the BIA is not even where they think they should be. This is some kind of an adjustment period, that there's more demand in the waning type of thing. Where do you think you need, like, this is a fairly, I realize maybe it's 20 years since the last time, so it looks substantial increase, and it's only a few $1,000s at the end of the day, but is there an end to it? Are you at a place where you think the BIA is functioning properly?
Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Mayor, to Councilor Byrne. So I don't think there is an easy answer to that one, to be honest with you. You can't keep operating with a deficit on your administrative level. Like, you have to get your operating costs or your levy to cover your operating costs. The BIA benefited in the last few years from some generous donations that propped it up, that allowed us to have events and carry on some marketing, which was exactly its purpose. But the fact remained that just to operate, you're drawing down from that. So if the BIA continues to operate exactly the way it is, it will be flush in like 4 to 5 years. So trying to prevent that from happening is by slowly bringing that levy up to at least covering the operating. And then views will be taken on the actual events themselves to try to turn them into at least like a negative, or not negative, a break-even type event, you know, rather than that's where the money goes. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done for sure. You know, and it's starting from a place of deep in a hole is really the easiest way to describe it.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair to that topic then. So has it not been the idea to make most of these events near break even, like instead of a deficit situation? And do you have any restrictions on what kind of revenues you can tap into?
That's true. Absolutely. If we could make every event break even, that would be wonderful. The fact is that there's a lot of capital outlay for a lot of these things. So in terms of, you know, whether it's bouncy castles or road restrictions, or even, you know, police presence, like, it all costs money. Like, there's no doubt about it. And when you have an event, you do hope to have vendors that come in to pay for a portion of it, and that will only ever pay for a portion of it. And you run into, if it's too expensive, they don't come. If it's too cheap, then, you know, you don't know what you're getting. So there's a massive balance in that. Events like the past one, which was the Christmas of the Village, we were fortunate enough to get a lot of donations for that one, which helped. You can only go to those donation wells so many times before they dry up. You know, as a small community with small businesses, you can only tap them on the shoulder so many times. So there's a lot at play in this one. I wish there was an easy answer and a constant funding formula, but there just doesn't happen to be. So the question is, the only way to scale it back would be if the vendor prices are too high, if the donations don't come in, then you got to scale back the events themselves. I don't think anybody wants to see the events disappear.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the events that the BIA hosts is, it's rare that the BIA is generating revenue. The idea is that the community businesses and those participating are benefiting from their own revenues that are then, that justifies the levy that they pay to be a part of the BIA, right? So it's rare that there are instances other than donations that the BIA itself generates revenue from events other than specific, you name it, nuanced components of an event, if that's not mistaken. But, and those are limited of what you can do to actually accumulate the funds. So other questions? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, I'm just curious what the participation rate is at this present time between the number of people that fall in that designated zone that can qualify to be in the BIA and the number that are actually participating to a reasonable degree or fully.
Through you, Chair, it's a great question. I believe there's about 44 potential businesses that are eligible to be BIA. Their eligibility is determined by a bylaw, which sets out the business improvement area, business improvement area. So that bylaw defines the boundaries of BIA. So any commercial property within that area is automatically membership to it. As far as their participation goes, it ebbs and flows depending on an event, depending on a month, depending on, you name it, it changes. Like there are certain events that benefit certain businesses and they're way more willing to be a participant and a donator to it. And there are events that have no bearing on some businesses and they still contribute to it because they know it's for the betterment of the downtown. Like the existence of a BIA is for the betterment of the mall, right? And that's kind of the way they're supposed to function. And you're right, like the ebb and the flow of who participates will always take place.
Thanks for that, Deputy Mayor. Other questions? If not, again, we're just receiving that presentation and those comments with regards to the downtown business improvement area be received for information. Moved by Councilor Byrne, seconded by Councilor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Next, Ms. Pope, the second draft 2025 budget presentation. Thank you, and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mayor Graham. This is the second draft budget presentation. Some of these slides are similar to what you saw in first draft. However, with all of council present today, we will go through each of the slides. We'll also highlight the various changes between first and second draft. And then we've added a few additional slides for clarification purposes. So as an overview, in this second draft budget, it would require a consolidated 4.99% municipal residential levy tax increase if funded as presented here today with no further changes. However, the intention today is to have further discussion with council and then along for public comment tonight to hear from the public as to their comments on the budget, and that will be taking place at 5 p.m. The 2024 actuals that you'll see throughout the budget include expenditures up to October 31st for sure. We did receive some more and have processed the ones that were received in time for this report. So there are some November figures in this budget, but we can guarantee up to the end of October 31st. We just haven't been billed for the rest of November as of yet. And the 2024 surplus is estimated at $250,000, which is the same as the previous first draft budget. Next slide, please. We want to highlight here that this is an additional opportunity for council to engage in discussions, offer input, and implement further modifications to the budget. This is really the last opportunity before we bring back the final draft on the 27th of January. So if there are any comments from council, any comments from public this evening, we're looking for that information and then direction from council so that we can set the tax rate and then proceed with the 2025 fiscal year. As a reminder, it's budget estimates that are in here. We do not have all of the December bills in. They're just starting to come in the month of January. So therefore, we don't have full information, but they are based on estimates as in previous years. Staff have continued to reduce budget expenditures. You'll see that throughout this document. And then also the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. We fully utilized all those funds that were sitting in the reserve towards eligible capital, and that brought down the budget as well. To remind council that every 1% municipal residential tax rate increase would equal approximately $117,100 towards the operating and capital budgets. In budgeting basics, the overall budget is comprised of two compartments, operating budget and capital budget. Obviously, if a capital item is not purchased, we wouldn't require, so for example, vehicle, we wouldn't require then fuel in operating. So they do correlate with one another, but capital is separate to identify the items that are above and beyond the regular operations of the municipality, and then operating being the regular operations of the municipality. A balanced budget. The Municipal Act prohibits a municipality from running a deficit on operating expenditures, and therefore we always bring forward a balanced budget. Annually, although the surplus isn't necessarily huge, we do budget knowing that there are some funds left over. We don't go back to the taxpayer and ask for those funds again. We roll it forward into the next year. So as mentioned on the first slide, 250,000 surplus is estimated at this point in time. We can borrow funds. That's a separate report. You'll see another report coming forward in January with regards to the fire hall, or not the fire hall, the Cavan Public Works, and then also the report for the fire hall thereafter. We always report on the ARL, and we're well within our limits. The budget process in summary, key steps. First, we develop budget guidelines and priorities. Staff revisit the budget every year in June and July and begin to submit through to the finance office in September. Thereafter, there are meetings that happen between September and October with the budget committee, which is comprised of the CAO, the mayor and myself, along with the senior management team and then other members of staff. The first draft this year was brought forward earlier in the end of November, which was a great successful meeting. It was great to have the opportunity for the additional time for council to review and ask questions in between. And here we are at the second draft and opportunity to hear from the public this evening. Ontario property tax assessment and tax system. Basically, the government of Ontario establishes the assessment and taxation laws. MPAC determines the assessment for the properties in Ontario. This is equalized across the province of Ontario. This isn't done individually, municipality by municipality. Then you have the municipalities to determine the budget that in essence is based on the CVA values provided to us to determine the tax rate. And then of course, the property tax owners who pay the property taxes according to those rates. Next slide, please. Because we don't know what the county and what the education rates will be for the next fiscal year, this slide is correctly identifying the previous year, or 2024, just to show the percentage of the tax bill that the property receives. So basically, if you receive a property tax bill from Cavan Monaghan, 58% of it is our municipal portion that we retain. 30% of it we receive and remit out to the county, and 12% we receive and we remit out for education purposes. So the actual portion that we are in control of is 58%. You can see there on the tax rates, this is posted online on our website, and you can go back as far as, I believe it's 2010 or might even be 2009. The residential tax rates broken down. We historically used to have wards. When that was eliminated, we started to show the separate municipal, county, and education total tax rates. Next slide, please. Upper and lower tier budgets. So obviously the County of Peterborough is our upper tier, and the upper tier is separated out on the property tax bill and provides a different level, other levels of service, and Cavan Monaghan being the lower tier. Next slide, please. Province-wide assessment update. We are hopeful that one of these days we will receive a new province-wide assessment update, but unfortunately it's not here yet. So we are still moving forward with the January 1st, 2016 phased-in values. That is represented on every property. So a property that is sold or purchased in the current years, MPAC will identify, put it through their system, which has 2016 rates. So they might be able to purchase a home for $1 million today as the sales data, but the MPAC current value assessment, I'm not going to speak as to what it is, but it could be 300 or 400,000, whatever the 2016 value is that MPAC provides. Everyone is treated equally. When we all move forward, we will all move forward together, and the phase-in date will be equalized for all of us. So basically, if I can put it in simple terms, if you have a pizza and it's cut evenly in 12 pieces, or you cut that pizza evenly into 24 pieces. If you originally had 1/12, you might have moved to 2 of 24. It's the same amount. It's whether or not your property grows exponential in comparison to the municipality as a whole. And that's a different story. If your property has numerous changes and has increased in value because you've added garages or additional property space, that's a different story. Now you're increasing much more than just regular phase-in values. The next slide is just an example you've seen before. I can't update the numbers for you because it is still based on 2016 data for CBA, but basically showing you the 4-year pattern that was in place before. We don't know if the next phase in will include 4 years, 3 years, 2 years. We don't know that information. So we're speaking on the past and what has been present, and that we've been locked in since 2020 with those 2016 values. Next slide, please. The Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund, we annually receive funds from the province. This year we are receiving $580,400. You can see there on the slide and in the report previous OMP F allocations that have been received through the years. This is formula based on our FIR, which is our financial information return and fiscal indicators. So annually we receive a notice of what the funds will be. So this year it's $580,400. Next slide, please. The OCIF, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund. This is the fund I mentioned at the very beginning. We took a look here to see any eligible project as recommended through the Budget Committee and at the first draft of Council. We've used all of the funds available to us in the reserve fund and the current year, bringing the funds down to the end of this year to be expected at 0. So we don't expect to have any remaining funds. Now, that being said, if a project comes in under budget, and we won't spend those funds elsewhere, it would stay in the reserve. But if all the projects actually come in as estimated, there would be no funds left in the reserve going forward. However, this is an annual allocation. So again, we would see what we would receive next year. This year, we are going to receive $314,191. However, we're using the reserve from prior years and the current year, and we don't anticipate any funds left over at the end of the year for the OCIF. Next slide, please. The Canada Community Building Fund, CCBF, we are receiving $328,025. We have not allocated all the funds that were in the previous reserve. There's about $41,000 being carried forward from previous years. And that in combination with the current $328,000 means at the end of the year, we expect there to be about $369,000 left in that reserve. There are some projects that can be considered towards other capital projects to use these funds towards, one of which staff had been reviewing was the new fire station. So additional information about that will come forward with the fire station report as well. But currently with this budget, we expect $369,550 to be left in that reserve at the end of the year. Again, this is an annual allocation, and they would let us know next year the amount for Cabot-Monaghan. Asset replacement. In the second draft of the asset replacement, we are still recommending the $2.9 million that was originally identified in the first draft report. This does represent 100% of the audited depreciation calculation from the year-end 2023. We take a look at the assets that we're currently using and have not been depreciated before, and that's what our depreciation values are. So we're always trying to put back into the asset replacement reserve a dollar value that represents what we're currently using. But as a reminder, these are based on historical costs, so they don't include cost indices, and they also don't include assets that have already been previously fully depreciated, because obviously there's no annual calculation for that either. So it's not a full holistic complete replacement program where I'll never receive a need funds elsewhere. However, it's a really great benchmark that we continue to try to achieve. Since 2016, the municipality has transferred approximately now 77% of the annual depreciation to the ARR. So through the years when we first started, I believe it was 200,000 that we put aside, and it's been growing ever since. So this is a great achievement to have these funds, and you can see throughout the report, especially when we get to capital, where you'll see we're purchasing a capital item, but we don't have to fully levy those funds through the municipal tax rate. We're able to offset some of that cost through what we've already put aside through the asset replacement reserve. Reserve and reserve funds. We have different funds and they work differently. So some are established by council or by province and by municipal bylaws. We also have strategy for funding programs. You'll see sometimes in our capital report where we're putting aside funds because in 3 or 4 years we intend to purchase or we know something's coming up. So we're requesting those dollars to be set aside. We can talk about that more as we get to the reserve report. They can be flexible or committed. We do have this separated on a reserve report so that we can identify to capital the ones that are committed funds or have obligations. And they're a tool for any long-term financial sustainability. We want to make sure that we can continue to operate and provide the services that we provide today long into the future. We want to keep our reserves for intended purposes. This is financial best practices. Some reserves that do have flexibility. Something we have done in the past is like our asset replacement reserve, where we temporarily take it aside because we know we don't need those funds immediately, and we can put them back in time for when they are needed in the future. Internal borrowing, but we would never want to fully withdraw and take away from something that's not going to be replaced over time. The annual repayment limit, I said we were well within it. Every report for debentures that comes forward, we always report on this figure. The most recent report that we received indicated we could have annual repayments of about $3.3 million. We're nowhere near that, but just for information purposes. Grant applications, we talked about this through the last number of budgets, including prior years. The most recent mold assessment on December 6th was provided to council in regards to the parks and facilities for the Millbrook Arena, and so that is remaining closed. As a reminder, we had submitted early in the year a scope change request to the Ministry of Infrastructure. We've been in communication with them throughout the year. We know that this is moving along. We've had great communication, but there have been no decisions made and nothing that we can report to council at this time, but it is still ongoing in the background. The rehabilitation of the Old Millbrook School was another grant application that had been approved, and we have received the funds over 4 municipal budgets. You'll notice this is the final year for our contribution. We do have to have the project completed by 2026, but within the 2025 budget, we have all the funds that we committed to raise so that we can proceed with the projects and have them completed. Capital infrastructure projects, the 3 main capital projects that we've been working on is the fire station, the Cavan Public Works Operations Center, and the Parks and Public Works Millbrook Depot. The depot was completed in October 2022. The operations center completed in November 2023, and the ambulance station just moving in as we speak. There will be a report brought forward when the project is completely finalized and all invoices are in for the fire station. It was requested by council that we bring back alternative financial options for the Cavan Public Works Operations Center. That is a report that I am currently working on, and it will be brought back to council on January 27th for further discussion. And the Parks and Public Works Millbrook Depot is being funded within. Council's opportunity for direction is now. Like I said earlier, this is our opportunity today prior to the next meeting where the final draft will be presented for approval. And therefore, we would like to receive any comments of council and any direction of council today or in the next few days to ensure that we're able to move forward. Right now in this proposed budget, it's a 4.99 municipal tax rate as presented. However, taking a look at tax increase changes, if you actually needed to reduce any further, this is a little chart just to help with that. So if you were trying to go down to 4%, you'd need to cut 115,000, 3% cut 232,000, et cetera. And again, every 1% municipal tax rate increase is equal to 117,100 in revenue. Using this information, a 1% tax increase would mean a $7.44 increase for every $100,000 of CVA assessment. So again, it's a reminder that the median for Cavan Monaghan is roughly around 400,000 for a CVA. It's not 1.2 million, it's not 1 million like you see on the sales data. So if you're multiplying that 7.4, you're not going to multiply it by 10 to accommodate for a million. You'd probably just multiply that by 4. So we've given there an example that if you had a property that MPAC had assessed at 400,000, then the 1% increase would equal $29.94 more in 2015 or 2025. Levy comparison. This is just to provide a 5-year chart. It's provided annually to council, so you can see the changes year over year in the tax levy and then changes year over year in the CVA. So the growth for us in the CVA is approximately 1.8% in this draft, and the proposed 4.99% is the tax levy percent increase. Next slide. These details have not changed with regards to the consumer price index. That has remained the same. The construction price index was confirmed after first draft report. It rose 3.3% year over year. And so that's indexing on the DC charges for the 2025 fiscal year. And December 16th, council approved the annual user fees and charges bylaw, and those dollar figures have been included within this draft. Municipal tax rates, you can see there are a number of different property class descriptions, the realty tax class and the qualifier, the various MPAC roll total, that's the CVA values that we're multiplying them by, and the tax ratios and reductions, providing you with the actual taxes that we are receiving through this year's municipal tax rates if it were set at the 4.9%. So ultimately that would be $12.2 million. Next slide, please. This is a summary pulling all the pieces together across the board between the operating, the capital, and all the different types of reserves and grants and funding formulas to determine the balancing for the 2025 draft before you today. The operating budget has a net decrease of 4.7%. You'll see that in the summary table that we have below. We've aligned all the staff wages, updated source deductions, provided grid indexing, and applied a 2% increase to hydro, gas, fuel, and telecommunications. And this is based on actuals. So sometimes you'll see those numbers changing because we're always watching the actuals and then multiplying across if they were to be allocated over a full fiscal year. Next slide. This is the table I was mentioning with the 4.7 consolidated departmental net changes. The attached summary reports on the agenda correlate to this table. In addition, the detailed pages that council has received in their package also correlate here, showing the various percentage and dollar value variances between the last budget last year and the second draft this year for year-over-year changes. If we look at all departments and all other services and levies, including the boards and authorities, committees of council, and our police contract, we're looking at a total of about a 4% increase overall. The environmental tax rate has a reduction. Actually, it's $1,455 less than it was in the previous year. We are in the new program with the Circular Materials Ontario for blue box materials, and therefore some additional revenues coming in there as well. So therefore, this year, the environmental tax rate as proposed in this draft is reduced by $1 or reduced to $1.42 for every 100,000 of current value assessment. And the water and wastewater budget is based on the financial plan and the studies that we completed with Watson Associates. It has a 5-year projection of the rates, and the study is based on that. They do not impact the municipal tax rate. Capital budget overview. These pages will look a little bit different between first and second draft. We've tried to highlight the changes and give you a look per department. We can come back to these pages as well. I'll quickly summarize and go over them, but we can come back to these pages as well thereafter. In this particular draft, there's $12.2 million of capital requests, and the actual funding that we need through the municipal tax rate is $4,117,351. Next slide, please. These are the changes that have occurred between first draft and second draft. So the facility recreation management software has been added for a net resolve of 5,800. We have moved from Keystone, as mentioned when the library was talking about the previous financial record keeping system that we had for the municipality. That system could not go online. We were given permission over 3 years ago to begin to migrate over to the new Diamond software that we are using today. We prepared for that in 2022. In 2023, all of our modules were coming on in the different months as we went through the year. And so as of 2024, we were fully migrated over. We have one piece left to migrate to new software. Diamond does not hold recreation software because those have become quite robust, where you can not only book facilities, but you can also subscribe your children into different events and programs. So those programs are now quite uniquely standalone. And so the Parks and Facilities Department has been looking at new software. So that is happening in the 2025 year. And so by the end of 2025, we should be complete and walking away from Keystone. And the Diamond enhancement is we are supposed to be able to get online with Virtual City Hall, and that is the final launch to get there. And that will happen in 2025 as well. At the last budget meeting, Mr. Hack had requested to increase the station park sign to go from the 7,000 rollover that they originally had to increase it up to 14,000. So that's included in this draft. The GovStack migration, we had MMAH funds that we could apply, so we were able to reduce that overall by applying the 5,000 there. We reduced the transfer to reserves for the zoning bylaw to 5,000 and reduced the transfer to reserves to the official plan to 10,000. So that brought down together about $45,000 on the capital budget. As per the motion of council at the first draft, to add a transfer to the Parkland General Reserve Fund on November 21st, and that was to the equivalent of 1%, and that's 117,100. So that's been included. MVT had requested to add the bridge at Old Millbrook School for $15,000. That was added. We applied CCBF funding to hot mix paving of 84,400, and we applied CCBF funding applied to sidewalks for Frederick Street at $65,745. And then we deferred Fallis Line East Road extension to future budget years, and therefore the original $100,000 asked was removed from this budget. A couple of points, you would have seen road milling for hardtop polarization. That was a separate line item. It hasn't disappeared, but you'll notice it's not a separate line item in the second draft. It's actually been allocated amongst the surface treatment roads. So the full project cost still remains the same, but just want to identify the change there if you're looking for it. And Public Works has also provided additional details regarding the proposed allocation to reserve funds for the future acquisition of a roadside mower with an intended purchase estimated for 2028. In the actual report, there's a little bit more information provided there, but we're just bringing that to your attention. In the capital requests, the first slide, we have the CAO, finance, and information technology. The projects there have primarily stayed the same, except for the one I mentioned earlier with regards to the information technology, adding in the new facility recreation management software. So cost of estimated at $7,300 with MMH reserve funding of $1,500 with a $5,800 implementation on the municipal tax rate. In addition to, because the project will take time to migrate over towards, we have budgeted within the operating budget approximately a half year of the licensing fees, expecting to be online somewhere around June or July of this fiscal year. The next slide is the Planning, Building, and Economic Community Development Department. Again, just highlighting each of the individual points there with the reductions that we did do for the transfer to reserve for the zoning bylaw and the official plan reserves. The next slide is Parks and Facilities, presented as is, and with the changes that were amended at first draft with the additional requests from the different boards and authorities. And then fire remained the same. You would have seen this in the first draft, just carried forward for your information. Roads Environmental Services, as mentioned earlier, with the pulverization move between all the surface treatment lines, and therefore the additional information provided in the report about the roadside mower as well. You'll see there highlighted under the other reserves and funding, OCIF, speaking about the reduction of that down to zero. That's the reason why that reserve will go down to zero, because we've used as many of the eligible projects that we could find that would could be used towards that project and use those funds. The grant applications that have been submitted, these have been submitted but not yet approved. So we wanted to show them in a separate light on a separate line item. So you could see this is what we're committing to and overall requests. In this year's budget, we need $40,890 to accommodate all of these particular 4 grant applications that have been submitted, with future budget approval needed for the 100,000 for Faultless Line if we do get approval, and we'll wait for that funding approval before we come back to council. Grant applications submitted. These are some ongoing smaller grant applications that we've submitted in addition to the ones on the other page with financial components. At this time, we are working with Grant Match, and they're doing a fantastic job at helping us to stay on touch. These do come out rather quickly, and the turnaround time is very quick, and they're quite detailed. So it's great to have their assistance. The next slide is the water wastewater capital request. Same as what has been provided before in the first draft, no changes provided there. And therefore, as per Finance Report 2025-01, the recommendation is that council receives the second draft budget presentation for discussion. And recommendation number 2, depending on the outcome of today, the recommendation at this time is the proposed 4.99%, but we'll defer that until conversations have happened today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. How does council feel? We're about to engage in, what will probably be a fairly robust and lengthy conversation. Would you like to take a 2-minute break now and just get water and bathroom? I know I could use it if everyone mean. Just take a 3-minute break and then we'll start in on the information. So motion to recess. No motion. Sorry. We're just going to recess for 3-4 minutes. Thank you. Okay, we'll now reconvene the special council meeting with regards to the second draft of the budget. Thanks, Ms. Pope, for that robust presentation about all the departments. So I thought it was good to add the slide about what's changed since D1, since D2, especially because there was a few absentees for D1 when those very few conversations were had. But so whoever would like to kick it off, just for a point, I think we've got it now that the slide numbers in the digital presentation are the same as the one that we circulated. So if you want to reference the page number or the department, whenever you want to do it, we'll try to work with Mark to get that slide up so we can all speak from the same hymn book on that. But so the presentation pages are as before us here. So who would like to start with a question with regards to the budget? Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, just more of a clarification, I guess, from Kimberly on the CCBF and the OSIF funds. I know we're applying them to capital projects is where they're supposed to go, but are they not supposed to be in-out funds from the province? Like, are we supposed to build a reserve for them and then apply them when we can, or are they supposed to be used? Like when we get 300,000, we're supposed to apply 300,000. So I was just curious, how did we end up with a reserve in the first place with them? As I thought they were supposed to be in and out type funds.
So they are usually provided annually because the notification comes towards the end of the year. Sometimes they realize we can use those full funds in that year, or we don't necessarily know the values at the time of the budget approval. So also too, once you have a capital project that you're approved that you're going to use, you may come under budget for that or may not spend it and roll it over. So the reserve is used to kind of augment that. In one particular reserve, we received additional amount during COVID. I don't know if you recall. And so that was unknown to municipalities. And again, we always have to fiscally report at the end of the year where we have or have not spent the funds with the carry forward balance and apply the interest to that portion for those projects. And on the reserve report, we also identified them on separate lines. They're towards the bottom, so you'll see the federal gas tax and those two as well. So the intention is that there's no long-term savings there. You wouldn't have it there for 5 or 6 years, but they understand that it's sometimes 1, 2, and 3 years to roll out these programs and get whatever it is done that you're doing. So to hold a reserve, that's why they have the caveat where you report at the end of the year and you apply the interest because that's a recurring. But we try to utilize the funds in the current fiscal year, but based on projects and what's happened, we had a little bit extra carrying forward.
If I'm not mistaken too, Ms. Pope, there's been a couple of capital projects over the past few years. I can think of 1 or 2 where after the funding, even with the allocation of the grants that we know of, we are still applying for additional funds, kind of like we have with the Fall East extension this year. There's a deferral because it wasn't going to be done this year anyways, but there's also an application for a grant funding for that we're not funding because it's not going to happen this year. So there are opportunities where in historical budgets where we've allocated a portion of those capital projects from the OCIF, when we get alternative non-annual sources of funding for that project, well, those monies go back into the reserve. They don't get spent, right? Because we've gotten another grant. Ms. Pope,
Thank you. That's a great segue too, because we have both the formula allocation, which is what I'm talking about here, and then we have the application base, and that's what you're talking about. So we apply for certain projects and we get enough funding through that or what have you, so we don't end up needing to touch the formula base. So we never take it unless it's actually needed. And if we receive funds elsewhere, then the elsewhere funds, they'll go in first and we'll leave it in the reserve and then bring it back forward for council to consider on another project in the future.
Yeah, and the only other caveat to that is the discussion at the finance committee was we should utilize the OCIF funds because they're far more restricted in legislation as to what you can use them for. So there's really only certain projects that qualify. Whereas the CCBF, there's more a wider net that you can cast with regards to what's eligible. And like we talked about, like the OCIF, the fire hall or any costs associated with the fire hall is not eligible for that, but under the CCBF it is. So that was sort of the catalyst to say, hey, you can use this money for funding other things that are challenging for, as we're still waiting on that report for January 27th about funding and debentures and how we're going to finance those projects that the budget mentioned too. Then that gives us another lever to pull that we wouldn't have in any of the other grants that we might be receiving. So, but that's just a comment on that. Other questions? Follow up, Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Yeah, through you, Chair, just still on that same grants topic. I guess like the grants that we have listed here, we're expecting, I guess it's an expectation that we'll win or be successful in getting a grant. What happens if we don't? Like, are we budgeting this based on like knowledge that we're gonna get this money? Or should we be budgeting that we don't get this money? And if we do get it, then it's a benefit. Like, I'm just curious about our philosophy on how we're handling this.
That's another great question. So through the mayor to the deputy mayor, we actually only put in the budget when we have formula-based funding that we know we are going to receive. Anything where we put in an application where we don't know and we're awaiting approval, we wait till the end. And that's how we're showing it separately on the capital side. Another example of that on a smaller scale would be our student grants. I don't bring forward student grant funding because some years we get some and some years we don't. And so I have no idea. So anything that's application based and we're waiting, no. Anything that we've received, like the ICIP ones that have been sitting on the books for 4 years and we've been levying funds, we got those. And so it's based on approval. So if they're approved, you'll see them in the budget. If they're not approved, then they're pending and we won't guarantee those funds are going to be used. Now, the OMPF, that one is provided for operating and applied across the board every single year, no shadow of a doubt. And again, when we're doing estimates, we always stay conservative until we receive the information. But historically, by the time we're approving the final budget, which again, this year, the same thing, we do have confirmation of those dollar values. So there's no guesswork once the final approval comes forward. Sometimes that first draft maybe, but by the time we hit final, we're good.
So the only, just to that point, Ms. Pope, the only kind of exceptions would be, we have funded the capital for these two applications that are currently underway that we're not of yet. So we're not reducing what the budget requirements will be for projects that we're not aware of yet. But we are allocating the 39, or I guess it's 40 and change. Yeah, 4890, there you go. I'm a little blurry already. So anyways, there you go. But for those two grants, if we're not successful in getting those grants, there would be those monies left over. Because those are, obviously, we're not going to spend it if we don't get it. Deputy Mayor.
Through your chair, then for clarification, then we're going to levy for the 40,890 or whatever it is. And if we aren't successful, then that 4890 just goes into a reserve based on these two. We're not.
Yeah, so we would bring back a report to indicate we have these dollars and it can be used if there's an idea to use it elsewhere, or if next year during the budget, we discuss it and we say we're not successful and therefore the funds that we had raised. That's why if we go back to the last chart, the last line item there, future budget pre-approval, because we don't know yet, right? So instead of raising 100,000, we're saying, okay, next year we'll have this discussion and hopefully we'll have an answer by then. That one.
Other questions? Councilor Burke.
Through the chair. So these funds, I'm hoping they don't have the same restrictions as some government grants that it has to be shovel ready or anything. The other thing, the portion of that, the grants that we have submitted that we're waiting for, do you have any idea, or are there any kind of firm timelines when they'll actually be approved?
So when we apply for each individual grant, they do have different timelines that they estimate an answer to be received by. But historically speaking, it hasn't always been that. We could wait a couple extra months and then there's a decision coming. So there's no guarantee, but each individual grant, we could definitely look up and see when they proposed that they thought they would be sending out information on the applications that were received and what's coming forward. Sometimes they say that it's, closed and they're still reviewing it and they take the next couple of months. It just depends.
Thanks, Ms. Pope. One question that I had with regards to the capital, I just don't see hands for a moment, but I know there's lots of questions, is in speaking with Mr. Allison, I just wanted to speak about the update because we talked about this, the Suzuki Butterfly Gardens project. And I know you've done some more work on it, Mr. Allison. So would you like to sort of share your findings and sort of talk to that item in the Parks and Facilities capital budget?
Yes, through you, Mayor. Christine Renich presented to Council David Suzuki Butterfly Way Habitat Garden, which was an ask of $5,000, which was deferred to the budget. A Butterfly Way consists of 12 habitat gardens in a community, in this case, Cavan-Monaghan Township, which fosters biodiversity such as birds, butterflies, and bees. Native plants are used. They offer the most support in terms of food, shelter, and pollinator benefits. Christina is partial to a location that will be most frequented by the community and that has a water supply to initiate the garden. In general, the funding will cover the purchase of native plants, perennials, site preparation, signage, and advertising to the public about the project. Christina's suggested locations were the splash pad area near the CMCC, Needler's Mill, Maple Leaf Park, Bruce Johnson Library, or the entrances to the trail system. Currently, the Parks Department maintains 18 gardens, plus there's the big community garden at the old school. Oh, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Allison. So if we need 12 and we already have 19, if I remember the presentation correctly, the 5,000 was to create a sort of one significant garden. Based on that, so if we have more gardens than are required already, is there a need for $5,000? I'm just curious now what we would allocate $5,000 towards to pursue something that it sounds like we kind of already checked a lot of the boxes for. So I'm wondering if there's a requirement for the 5 or if we can go lower than that number based on what we already have existing as our complement of gardens.
Through you, Mayor, currently with our 18 gardens, we meet the 12 in a community. Our 18 gardens, they do have perennials, they have annuals, they have shrubs, they have trees. The only thing really missing in our gardens would be maybe signage, which we could lessen the $5,000 and put signage in our gardens.
If council's amenable, any discussion on that? I mean, like I said, if Chris has done the homework, it sounds like that our garden complement already has a lot of the pollinator and butterfly friendly composition. So to build one $5,000 garden for the specific project seems like unnecessary, but maybe we can reduce that number and enhance the existing gardens. Councilor Byrne, comment?
Through the chair on that point, I would think that if we have 18 of them spread out over the entire township, that does way much more for pollinators than one big garden in one area that's probably going to be contaminated by something else because it's going to be in a downtown area.
So in that regard, Chris, is there some amount that we would need? Like, do you have any estimation? Like you mentioned some signage, I'm not sure if the Suzuki Foundation has some specific signage that they want or things of that nature, but you might require multiple if we're trying to recognize or identify the gardens or the species. I'm not sure what the requirement is, but I know council wanted that discussion had at this time. So any suggestion as to a reduced amount that might be accomplish what we're trying to participate in the program, but not build the one mega garden?
Through you, Mayor, I would recommend $1,000 for signage for the 18 gardens that we do maintain right now.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Chair, through you. I think we should keep $1,000 for some signage, as I had no idea we had 18 gardens. And I think it would be great to promote the fact that we have 18 butterfly gardens, and the fact that we didn't actually have that knowledge when we were being presented with, you may have probably had that knowledge, but we didn't have that knowledge. And I'm pretty sure if you asked most people, they wouldn't know. So let's promote it. Let's promote that we have these gardens and that they already exist, that we're ahead of this curve. So let's keep $1,000 in there and let's put some signs up and toot our own horn for a change. Thank you.
Councilor Natchoff? Sorry.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Chris, I'm just doing the numbers. Does $55 seem reasonable for each individual sign? Or do we maybe want to increase this to potentially $2,000 and have additional Wayfair signs and a little bit more to add to a marketing end of things so that it could be a little bit more of a driver kind of thing to the community?
Through your mayor to Councilor Natchoff, I believe $1,000 will be suffice. We do have multiple gardens in certain areas where maybe one signage would do. Like if we look at the CMCC, we have 8 massive gardens around the splash pad area there. So maybe a sign or two, one on each side, would suffice for those 8 gardens. Yeah.
Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair on that note, the mention of Wayfair, does this get into the sign bylaw that we just created not too long ago, and the concept that we're gonna try to form going forward, all our signage to fit some master plan. And does it get expensive when we do that?
We don't, we haven't approved anything about that. It was a discussion, but it's actually been removed by the Mr. Hack committee about that component. But I think for my understanding about the signage was that the Suzuki Foundation has specific components and signage that to be benefit from the marketing and the participation, I guess, in this sort of recognition of this sort of program and this qualification. There's signage that they have and that we would be using for, and then anything else would be auxiliary. And I'm sure we could, support with the website, just including on the Parks and Rec stuff, a brief verbiage about where these are, et cetera. So if Chris tells me 1,000, and like I said, Rome wasn't built in a day, and we can always come back again next year if there's additional signage requirements. So does someone want to make a motion for the $1,000 so that we reduce the capital budget from 5,000 to 1,000 for I want to use the right verbiage for Ms. Page, for the David Suzuki Foundation Butterfly Project. Yep. So before that motion, before anyone makes that motion, Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, does this fall under the jurisdiction or the realm of economic development? Could this not be part of their budget rather than this $1,000 for signage being a separate item?
So right now, it's a capital project under Parks and Facilities. It could be a capital project under Economic Development. It could be a capital project under either of those two. It's just Chris is going to be doing the work. So I would assume that Chris would want the money to do it unless Chris is going to go do the signage. But I think it's more Chris's staff that'll be doing it. For sure. Okay, piecemeal, one step at a time in that direction. So we got a mover and Deputy Mayor Huntley, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. All in favor? That's approved. First one down, so we can make a note of that. So we reduce that down. Okay, other questions, members of council? Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, just having gone through a few of these budget sessions, I think if we're going through the capital, would it make more sense just to start with the first department and go department by department, and then we're not jumping all over the place? Just recommendation.
Be happy to do that. So excuse my enthusiasm, but we'll go back to the where would you like to start? We'd like to start. So the Chief Administrative Officer budget is there, but there's no levy implications. The finance, the asset management reserve is there, but usually the utilization of that we defer to a later date. So I guess IT would be sort of the first significant capital. So if any questions with regards to the IT expenditures? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, and apologize, I'm just trying to formulate. I was going to ask Kimberly earlier, we were talking about the migration from the Keystone to the Diamond, and then the rec department was going to have a standalone thing. And Carly made up the point of how the cybersecurity for different formats and different things, is that going to create another expense that way when we do this separate IT for the parks compared to the Diamond that we paid for the entire township?
In reference to the cybersecurity that's provided as a whole for the municipality based on all the different software packages that we have. Right now, the County of Peterborough is our managed IT contract, and they are servicing the Keystone aspect and the Diamond aspect because they are still on Keystone. So when we switch over, they'll no longer be on Keystone, and they would be on the new software that they choose, this new recreation software. And so the county would still be providing coverage for that. So it's not an additional above and beyond. They're already covering the cyber coverage. We're not adding, we're replacing. It's two different systems.
Follow up, Ms. Hurley.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor Byrne, just for clarification, I think one of the questions he was asking is with regards to Diamond, how come we're ordering another software when I think you were going, yeah, okay, okay. Kimberly, maybe you can mention, because Diamond did not have a booking type of software, so that we always knew right from the very beginning. So maybe you could just explain that. Why we are now considering a booking software for recreation. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Nacho.
Thank you through you, Chair. So just so that I'm clear then, so the Diamond software is set up to work as a kind of like virtual city hall, but yet within the software, it didn't include a platform that would accommodate booking, like, so like, here's an example. You have like the sports and rec center down in Whitby. So the city of Whitby, I'm assuming they're also on Diamond, as we would see in larger municipalities and cities across Ontario. That wouldn't have something in place to manage an even much larger facility, and that these other communities have to go and seek a secondary software platform?
Yes, we did discuss this at length too, when we brought the report forward to council. It was that and vital statistics. There were two aspects that were no longer being incorporated or rolled into financial software. The vital statistics made a little bit more sense because there was no financial component to it. It was more of a record keeping. Booking didn't at first make sense to us either when we first inquired about it. However, because they've become so robust, so you're talking about families being able to set up profiles where they have a profile of, say, 3 children and 2 adults, and then they're able to subscribe for one to be in skating lessons and one to be in swimming lessons and one to, we want to book this field and we want to, and so it is so robust that they're actually standalone units now where payments go directly through there. Now there will still be an integration back to Diamond to bring the GL detail over to us financially. So it's not that that's lost. It's just that it operates independently on its own. And what's fantastic about it is it also coordinates the workflow. So right now, Keystone does that for Parks and Rec, where they can have certain facilities that are booked. The staff know they need to set up the tables or they need to do this or that. It's all there. This software is that all-in-one software to do it all and keep it all together. And the larger municipalities, it's not that we didn't subscribe to or didn't buy the module, it's not available. And the financial aspects, because it's way beyond just taking the payment and billing the customer. It's more to a robust, all-inclusive, provide services, access online, not have to speak with anybody and do your own account by yourself. And so that's why the industry has kind of taken this different shift. I don't know if, Chris, if you want to say anything about that.
Thanks for that. Other questions with regards to the IT? Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, I'm going to step backwards because I missed the chance at the finance part. The line where we're talking about asset management and bringing it up to 100%. That's not carved in stone by any chance. Like there was a hope that we want to get to. So that number is still somewhat flexible.
Yeah, it's entirely flexible. Usually because of that factor, we're always trying to pursue the 100%. We've yet to, I don't believe, ever achieved it in year. I think last year it was approximately 2.583 million, which was in the realm of 88% of that year's, annual depreciation from the year prior. But yeah, so because that has the ultimate flexibility and that has by far the biggest impact on the levy in the capital budget this year, we try to go through other departments first, and then we'll come back and have that conversation about what we think is attainable and go from there. So by all means, you haven't missed it. We'll come back to that for sure. So IT, any other questions with regards to the expenditures with regards to IT? And if not, we can move forward. We can always come back to if Shelby misses something, but Councillor Byrne, go ahead.
Through the chair to Kimberly, this postage machine, is it going to become outdated with the way that things are going with Canada Post? Are we making a smart move here, or I don't know what's involved in it even?
So it was recommended that we upgrade and change our machine. So it was actually available for renewal last year, at the end of last year, but we pushed it off to this year to take a look at it and to determine what they have and what services would be enhanced by it and what would not be. So it's part of the hardware deployment program where we have our computers that are replaced every so many years. And this is the recommendation for replacing the NeoPost machine at this time.
So maybe I think, and I don't want to speak for Councilor Byrne, but it will maybe highlight, so how much of this machine do we utilize, or what are the main utilizations for it, like for tax bills or any sort of communication? Like what, maybe just provide some clarity as to, like, is it necessary given like the modernization of communications, et cetera? But I know in the municipal world, there's still a lot of, hard copy mail requirements, even for things like signatures, which even though Adobe has, robust and encrypted signature protections, we're still required in different legislations for different processes to actually use the mail for various communications.
Those are great questions, and some of them I can answer and some I can't. We're a bit of a flex environment. So thinking of Virtual City Hall, when we launched the water bills last year, there was an opportunity to receive them by email even before we launched the Virtual City Hall. So some of our residents have subscribed to that. So we're no longer putting out mail for that aspect. But outside of that, 1,000 bills every 2 months is going out from water, wastewater to our community. So that would be one use of it. Each department does use it. Property taxes got so large because we're over 5,000 bills that's actually contracted out services. So we don't use the NeoPost machine, but we do use it for any of our omits and subs that are done throughout the year, but just not the 2 tax billings in a year. Then we have other services that are going to come online now once we launch Virtual City Hall. And I don't know the subscription base. So if we got 40-50% of people, then the NeoPostage machine usage would go down. We don't bring our mail to Canada Post locally and ask them to place the stamps on it or to do that processing. We do that through the NeoPost machine here on site at the municipal office, and we load the machine with dollar value, and that's how it's gone out. There's also different notifications, public notifications that we're still doing by paper through the building and planning department. So it's very much high in use, but I can say if you asked me this question 2 years down the road, I would hope that we have more online subscription and less paper subscription. So it's a hard in-between place to be to fully say the utilization of it, but yeah.
Thanks for that, Ms. Pope. Deputy Mayor Huntley?
Through you, Chair, to Ms. Pope, with regard to this post machine, like, do we actually physically buy the asset, or can we not just lease an asset for this purpose?
The cost value approach in the past has been more favorable for the municipality to purchase it. It doesn't mean in this flex environment, when they bring us the options this year, that there could be, when we're doing that cost analysis benefit and the change that we're experiencing, it could be rolled up into a lease instead. But again, I don't know at this time, but if we were to purchase, that 5,000 is for the purchase. Yeah.
And I think you may have mentioned this, Ms. Pope, but on that same line, what's the shelf life of the unit? Like for the 5,000, you're expected to get 3 years, 4 years? I think you mentioned how long we've had the previous one. I'm just curious.
I believe off the top of my head is somewhere between 5 and 7 years, but I can go back and check. That's okay.
Other questions on IT? If not, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, on that note, is there a guesstimate, the machine that we have now, of its lifespan? Because we are not doing the billing for the taxes anymore in-house. I know there's, from what you've just told me, there's a fair bit, but I'm just thinking down the road, how long is this new machine going to be viable or useful? And how long can we stretch out the one we had now?
So sometimes it's about capability of updating the software. So sometimes it becomes not operational or not useful. As far as the property taxes, that was taken out before the last cost benefit analysis. We had already moved out to contracted services at that point. So this particular renewal wouldn't be like, oh, that's the reduction. That was already removed on the last removal. But it depends what they can service us with and then what services are available as we continue on. So we might be able to run the life of this current machine for another year or two and stay within the software limitations and still be able to provide the service and the same download that we do today and run the machine. But again, until they bring forward the different options, the lease options, the purchasing options, and what's going to change in our contract with regards to what they can and cannot provide through the machine would depend on which option we would take moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that, Ms. Pope. Questions, comments? Seeing none, we can always come back, like I said, but let's get one run through. So now the next is planning, building, and economic development on the next page. That's it up there. Thanks for that, Mark. Questions, comments, members of council with regards to this part of the capital budget? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to whoever can answer this, what are we expecting to get out of this study for employment lands, and what lands are we actually bringing into that envelope?
Ms. Hurley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to Councilor Burns. So what this is a variety of studies that we need to do for some of the properties that we've just recently purchased in 2024. So some of those studies, as you know, we have to do Hydro G, we do the ARCs, we have to carry out a numerous amount of studies to bring that up. And as we've publicly identified the two recent properties, one's Moncrief and one is Tinny Lands, those are the studies that we have to do to be able to identify and move forward with them.
Through the chair, yes. So that's what I was hoping for, but just the way it's worded, I didn't know if we were thinking farther down the road, a bigger scope of what we need for development lands or whatever. And to the point about the Tinny property that we purchased here in the last year, I'm curious because I know staff and the last council were anxious for that property to be purchased. I would think that some of these things had already been looked at possibly, no?
Ms. Hurley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, to council. No, as we noted that all the studies, when we purchased those properties, we purchased those properties without carrying those studies. We did a minor study on the Tinny properties prior to, but the other properties, we just purchased those properties without carrying out the appropriate studies, and the appropriate studies, as noted, need to be carried out.
Thank you, Ms. Hurley. Other questions with regards to planning and ECDEV? I have one, so I can take a stab while other people are considering. I subbed in for Councillor Edgerton at the previous Mr. Hack meeting, and there was a bit of a discussion with regards to the constant evolution of the station park sign and what's going on. As council may remember, in the summer months, we approved to move forward with a $7,000 allocation in the capital for sign to be created at Station Trail. Now we're asking for another 7,000 for the same sign. And if Deputy Mayor Huntley will remember, this project started about 7 years ago as a mural update and it's continually rolled over, and we haven't seen any actual sign, mural, or anything. And I feel as though a $14,000 sign is a significant investment. And, in speaking with Councillor Edgerton, he sort of agrees that, that it's definitely something we want to recognize, but as we did with the Bell and talking about incorporating that historical component into the new downtown park, there's probably additional elements when you have Needler's Mill already there and other historical elements in the community that can be highlighted in that sort of park. To me, it would make sense that there should be some sort of accommodation or recognition of the old train station that was bringing you to Millbrook, which is why the mural was downtown Millbrook in its original position. So in my position, I think a $14,000 sign is a bit extravagant. We've already given endorsement for projects year over year over year, and we haven't seen it yet. So I think from that location, given that there's no sidewalk, I think that a $7,000 recognition sign should be more than enough of a budget to come up with some sort of commemoration, and then certainly be open to further inclusions or recognitions to wherever in the downtown village, whether it's a mural or not. I think that will probably be a decision that might have implications with the Tinny Lands themselves, because they are right beside where that traditional mural location was. So I just think if we're going to do something, $7,000 seems like a very expensive sign. We just talked about some garden signage for $1,000, and council's approved the 7,000. So I'm not trying to undo that, but an additional 7,000 seems extravagant to me. So I think it's worth a consideration to say you've got approval on your 7,000, but an additional 7,000 is a bridge too far. But that's just my comments, and open to discussion about that issue. Deputy Mayor Huntley.
Through you, Chair, this 7,000, I think we've rolled it over about 4 times now, if I had to guess. But I would say, I would hope Mr. Hack would come forward with something for the 7,000. If it happens to be more than 7,000 or 8,000, bring forth options to council to approve more. Like they have the 7,000, go spend the 7,000 on your sign. But if it's if it's bigger than 7, then, let us know. But I have to agree. I don't think we should double it, considering it's been a multitude of rollovers and we've yet to see what the end result actually is.
I got Councillor Edgerton and then Councillor Byrne. Councillor Edgerton, just like to speak.
Yeah, I think that $7,000 is sufficient for now, and I agree with the mayor that we should not up that rate up to the 14,000.
Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, have you even decided on a location, or is there going to be more than one location for the sign? Has that even been hammered out yet, or are we still in that discussion of phase 2?
Ms. Hurley?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Would you like to speak to this matter? Because I know that there has been a motion from the committee and the committee did bring this forward. You are on the committee, so I'm just wondering if you could maybe clarify some of the questions today.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to members of council. The Mr. Hack Committee has asked for an additional $7,000. We recognize this project has been going on for several years. Now we have a theme that has been presented to council. We have a location at Station Park. We actually have a cost estimate. So we've actually done the work to generate a concept and a pylon sign. And we've gone so far as to get an estimate from various contractors. We cannot do the sign with the concept that was generated for the $7,000 that's already approved. That is why you're seeing a request for the additional $7,000. The location is at Station Park. Originally, it was to be a mural on the side of the existing pavilion at Station Park, but that was felt that that is not in the best interest of the municipality or the committee going forward or visitors to the attraction. So, in August of 2024, we came with a report outlining what the concept for the sign, what it would look like, what the content is going to be, the theme of it, where it's going to be placed, the scale of it, all of that was presented to council at the time. So the additional $7,000 request is because of the cost estimates we received.
Councillor Byrne and then Councillor Nacho.
Through the chair to Ms. Ellis, could you share with us what those estimates were, please?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to members of council, I don't have the cost estimates before me today, but I can tell you that they were all very close, and the additional $7,000 for the total of $14,000 was, I believe, was the cheapest of the options.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. Just, I guess, a clarification point here then. So if the intention is to put it in the Station Park area, I know that at some point we're going to be completing the new well that we purchased the land there. Is there going to be signage that's going to be erected for that well in any way? And then if that be the case, could it maybe be, before we erect this new sign, we would look at what's going to be put up in that area in support of the well, and then maybe piggyback on, like, if there's a wall or something, then there's that opportunity so that before we build the sign, we may also consider what's going to happen with that new location for the well.
Ms. Ellis, would you like to speak to that?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to members of council. Honestly, I was not aware that there was going to be a new well at the Station Park location. I thought there was a different property.
So I'll take a stab at it just for the sake of clarity. So there is not, I think, based on my recollection, this is a few months ago now, but this is supposed to be like a historical, like, commemorative sign. So it's not like when I look at even the right beside it with the Millbrook Works Yard, that is the extent of the signage that there would be at a well. It's not a historical, text-heavy, commemorative signage. What the committee had drafted, at least in a draft form when they came before in the summer, was some sort of three-dimensional, not necessarily interactive is a bit of an extravagant word, but more of a robust historical content piece that wouldn't really be affiliated with some sort of basic sort of identification sign like the works yard or like the wellhead. Because it's a well, it has to be very fenced in and very kind of restricted. So it's a good idea, but I think what they had in mind and what Mr. Hack has been working towards is more of wouldn't be something that would also be kind of attributed or affiliated or connected with that specific sign. That's just my take based on the drafts that I've seen in the one meeting I attended. Ms. Ellis, maybe you want to provide some clarity from your experience on the board?
Thank you, Mayor Graham. To members of council. Yes, the sign that Mr. Hack intends to locate at Station Park is intended to be an historical monument of sorts, is to tell a story of when people first arrived in Millbrook. They came by train, then, as they come, they stay in a hotel, they make connections, they get a job, they find a place to live, they go to school, they go to church, they shop at businesses. So it's to tell the story of someone new arriving. That's kind of the theme, but to give people some historical information about Millbrook in general at this time. And this sign is intended, I think, to be the first of a number of signs throughout the community to capitalize on our history and promote a tourism opportunity. So it's not strictly an identification sign. It's intended to present the beginnings of the history of what Millbrook was historically and how people moved through the process. And then, as we go to other signs, where we get today.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Ellis. I can appreciate like that sort of vision, but I mean, if they're talking about many instances of $14,000 signs, that gets really cost prohibitive in a real hurry. And I think my concern is that, this project has migrated so far away from where it was, that it's got to stop somewhere and something's got to happen and we've got to make a decision. And for me, $14,000 for one isolated sign in an area that's not really foot traffic friendly other than with the trailhead, doesn't have a sidewalk, doesn't have other amenities. I mean, to me, it just seems like a significant cost. And so I think it's still worth considers that you've got you've gotten approval for the 7,000. By all means, work within that constraint. And, designs come in over budget all the time and they need to be revisited and redesigned to work within the constraint of the budget that you have. So as well intended as it is, I just think that there's got to be a limit somewhere. Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, for the historical part, I think most people settled this area on foot and then later on by horse, long before the train came. But I would ask, because the signage thing has changed and I wasn't aware of, that QR code that was talked about, if you go ahead with some signage, I'm not a big fan, but I know people are interested in that kind of stuff. Would that be incorporated into what you've already put forward as an estimate?
Through you, Mayor Graham, to members of council, yes, there will be a QR code associated with that will, Ms. Iott can speak to the more technical aspects of it, but there would be additional information attached to that QR code that would give further detail about the history of Millbrook and the environs.
Okay. Other questions? Councillor Nacho?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Maybe not as much a question as maybe just like observation or suggestion. If at $14,000 you're not able to do what you're able to do, if we only provide 7,000, maybe this might be an opportunity to open it to certain artistic people in the community and see if they may be willing to want to work in conjunction with the committee to offer, the opportunity for time, expertise, and that sort. I know that with the Blocks and Blooms, there was a lot of that kind of additional volunteer support that may be available to, smooth over the shortfalls between the 7 and the 14. And if that's the case, I'd be happy to kind of talk to you separately about this. And before we, I just speak about this person, that person, whatever, we could have a discussion so that if you do come 7,000 short, which it's sounding like you most likely might, that we can kind of strategize as to where we could maybe help out in that way.
Yep, that's and again, there's fundraising and other grant applications that might also be amenable, but at the end of the day, they've come to council with the request for the monies and we need to make that decision today. So if any other questions about that item, if not, I'll make the motion that we remove 7,000 from the capital budget with regards to the additional cost of the station park signage. So moved by, seconded by Councillor Edgerton. All in favor? That is approved. Okay, still on planning and economic development. We've made 2 cuts as far as I'm concerned, so that's 12,000 less than what we had before. So progress, albeit the same. Moving forward, any other planning, building and economic development questions? Maybe just one, Ms. Hurley, for you, just briefly. Given, I think we're still, I believe we're on the precipice of getting county OP approval. Is there, I guess it depends on when that finality comes. Is there an expectation that we may be able to start any of the official plan work for the municipality in this calendar year? Or are we really realistically, that work can't really start dependent on that approval date until 2026?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to Ms. Ellis because she has new information that I'm sure that she's happy to share with you.
Through you, Mayor Graham, to members of council, I believe there is a chance that we will be able to start our official plan process in 2025. You will get a report at the first council meeting the next council meeting in January, outlining the timing. So there is a plan in place at Peterborough County to do consultation on modifications to the plan that will occur in January and February. There will be an open house and a public meeting, and then it will be presented to county council for approval. It will be sent to the minister and the ministry staff for review and approval. They've already seen the document, so it should be a fairly quick turnaround. The unknown in all of this is whether there will be a provincial election. So that may or may not affect the timing, but if everything went well, we could be looking at starting, I believe, by the fall.
Okay, thanks for that, Ms. Ellis. Any other questions with regards to planning and building? If not, we'll move on to the next slide. Seeing none. Okay, moving on to parks and facilities. Sorry to jump the queue on this one, Chris. Other questions from members of council? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to the first line, Chris. Let's make sure I got this right. That money's that's going to get moved that we did at the last budget meeting there and moving that 117,000. Is that coming out of the monies that's been collected over the years for parkland in the township in lieu of cash?
So I can answer that question. No, that's levied money that we're putting into a reserve now. So that's like there was 100,000, I think, in the first draft, and then the previous move we approved an increase of 70,000 to make it an even 1%. So that is levy money this year that's going into the general parkland reserve. That's it. Like it's levied dollars that are going into that reserve.
So if I could get the mayor too through the chair. So 3 lines down, we're talking about that grant stuff. Can you just explain those entries on that line to me so I'm sure what we're talking about?
So Ms. Pope, I think he's referring to the ICIP. So you just want to walk through that?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. The Old Millbrook School and the Millbrook Arena both received ICIP grant approval back in 2021, 2 different months, March and August. And therefore, there was a component that we were to raise ourselves as a contribution towards it. And then the rest was the actual grant. So, for example, the Old Millbrook School, the second line, the total project cost was $511,750. We would receive $375,266 through the ICIP grant. We have raised through previous budgets $104,084. This year is the last year that we're needing funds, but $32,400, and then we'll have all the dollars to complete that. So then the next line being the Millbrook Arena, same idea. That's the one that has the scope change request that we were submitted in the first quarter of the year. And so therefore that one, we're just waiting on the information there to refurbish that space. But basically it originally was $966,000 with ICIP contribution of $708,000. We've raised through the municipal levies and past budgets, 196,000, and then this year 61,000. So there'll be no more funds required next year because we've now raised to the maximum that's in the grant to complete those two projects. And they have to be completed by 2026, I believe is the report. Yeah.
That answer the question, Councilor Brent, follow up?
Through the chair, yes. I just curious, have we received that ICIP? No, it's still in approval states.
So for the ICIP, we don't receive it until the project's complete. No, and even after, like until the project's complete, we would in essence be subsidizing the grant portion from the reserve that would then be replenished when the final project is built. So in essence, our portion that we will be on the hook for, if you want to call it that, is the 196 or the 104 plus the amount that we're levying this year. But we don't have any of the money from the province yet, and you don't get it until you get a reimbursement after the project is complete. Follow up?
Through the chair to that point. So we're virtually guaranteed that money at some point down the future if those projects are finished. It's not a situation where they could say, no, you're not getting it.
Follow up or other questions with regards to other items, members of council? Deputy Mayor?
Through your chair to Mr. Allison, the demolition of the arena, the 100,000 being transferred to reserve, does that top the reserve to where we need to be, or is there still funds that will need to be added to that at some point?
Through you to Deputy Mayor Huntley, the original quote that we did have on it was $200,000. We did receive a second quote, which took into account the designated substance survey, which would be the disposal of the hazardous materials in the building, which has come back at $260,000. So as of right now, we're at $200,000. It will go out to, this is just one quote that we've got, so it will go out to tender. We don't know if this quote's really high, really low. So we could have enough with 200,000. We may need more.
Thank you, Chris. Paul? Nope. Okay, just contemplative look. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Chris, on the fourth line down, I believe it is 46,000 for furniture or whatever. What's that ask for in the CMCC, please?
Through you, Mayor, to Councilor Byrne, this is a rollover from the build of the CMCC, so there is no levy on this.
So as it just indicates, there's some additional furniture and equipment but can you provide any clarity on those amenities that haven't been purchased yet?
Through you, Mayor, to Councilor Byrne, we are looking into trophy cases at this time, which would be one purchase that will be out of there.
Follow up, Councilor Byrne.
Just for curiosity on that point, please, through the chair, the trophy cases, have we got an idea of where they're gonna go and what we're gonna get as far as that? And will they hold the things that will be coming up as memorabilia?
Through you, Mayor, to Councilor Byrne, right now, we're just in the phase of, we're looking for areas, we're getting some pricing. Whether it be a glass trophy case, wooden trophy case, we're still working on locations and pricing.
And that would come forward in a report to council at a later date. Ms. Hurley, was there something else to add?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I would like to add, like currently right now, what we've done with all the trophies is we've categorized all the trophies that we currently have at the Millbrook Arena. A lot of families have come forward and asking for some of their information or documentation, pictures, trophies, etc. So the Parks Department is going through that and working with those families that have come forward as well. So we are in the process of sort of removing some of those trophies, removing the cases, starting to communicate with the families that would like information or with the trophies. We'll then determine which ones are left at that time and whatever the design is and where we locate the new trophy case at the CMCC and what that look would be. Again, we would come before council to let you know that, but we'll also, I'm sure that there might be some that are still asked to stay into this new case. So we will determine all that and it will be coming before you with a report.
Yeah, and I assume that doesn't just pertain to the trophies themselves, because I think of, when I remember going up the steps, the commemorative photo of the former husband of former councillor Kathy Moore is there. So there's a lot of commemorative things that should go to, should go to families for that sentimental purpose. So thanks for doing that work. It's important. And on another note as well, I think most of council is aware, the existing trophy cases was able to actually get an email from a member of the family that donated the former wood trophies. And they're very happy to know that we're working with the Legion, and because they could use those facilities for some historical demonstration profile things that they're trying to use. So we're trying to work with the Legion to allow them to inherit those former trophy cases and use for future purposes for the Legion, and commemorating all of the history of the Legion and projects that they're working on too. So it's a good news. It was a very timely email to get, because I didn't know how to find someone whose father donated something 60 years ago. Other questions with regards to parks and facilities? Seeing none, we can move on and to the next protective services. Any questions with regards to the protective services capital budget? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to the chief. I'm trying to figure out, these were having some kind of problems with the tanks and the baffles, and I don't know if that's chlorinated water or what was causing that, or where you're on with that problem. And I'm also wondering, one of the items here is to replace one of the tanker trucks. Was that because of wear and tear, or whatever you want to call it? And is there not a resale value on something like that? And how would that get mixed back into this budget?
Through the mayor to Councillor Burns, three-part question. First of all, the issue that we had with our two existing tankers up at Station 2 has been resolved, and that those funds are not in here. They were resolved in a previous budget. Second part to the question, the tanker that we're speaking to here, replacing and asking for really pre-approval, because we're looking to send out the tender this year. We're not sure if we're going to get it this fiscal year or it'll be coming in 2026, but we'll see what the market will bear because of the backlog with ordering of trucks. It's an existing truck that's at Station 1. It's a single axle truck. This budget request is increasing that truck to a tandem axle truck, similar to what we have at Station 2, along those lines. And it's a requirement of the FUS fire underwriter surveys for your insurance rating for your department, right? I think I know we're a 3B, and that's the best rating that you can achieve for a volunteer firefighting department. The only way you could get a 3A, if you will, is if you had full-time fire suppression staff. So we're very proud of our rating, and so they require that this truck be replaced. It's a 20-year life cycle, but if you look at it, we're a little over that. We've asked for an extension for that 20-year ruling in light of the fire station at Station 1. We knew it was being replaced. We couldn't put a tandem in it. There wasn't enough room, and the council has been supportive in putting funds in previous budgets to cover this expenditure for when the new station came online. I hope that and the third part of your question is the implications for the sale of the truck. Is there any value? Yes, there would be a value. We'll put it out to the market in line with our financial policies, if you will, and see what funds, and those funds would go back into that reserve.
Other questions, Councillor Edgerton?
To Mr. Mayor, to the fire chief, I believe the underwriters are the guys that say that these trucks have to go after 20 years. These trucks do not have that high a mileage on them, and if they pass their pump test and they pass the road test, why do we have to get rid of these trucks just because some guy sitting in the high tower thinks 20 years is the life expectancy of it if it's still doing a good job? And the second question on that, do we need to replace that small truck with another great big truck? Like we have a Superior Tanker Shuttle Service accredited in the township, and we have two big tankers. Like how many more tanker trucks do we need to maintain?
Chief?
Through the mayor to Councillor Edgerton, two good questions. I'm going to try to start with the first one. The underwriters set your, the requirement is through the Foss Fire Underwriter Survey. And everything that you said is correct, Councillor Edgerton, save and except that if we weren't to do the truck, the fear would be if you lose your rating, you slip to a, and I hope I'm getting the letters right, from a B to a C, you're going to affect every single resident in the, 8, 10, and 12 kilometers from the fire station, their insurance rating and their insurance, they'll notice an increase. You might get away with it the first year, but it's like a rubber band. When each of the insurance companies catch up and that rating slides, then you will be receiving, I would suggest to council that you'd be receiving calls from your constituents that their insurance increases are substantial due to that non-replacement of that truck. Can you refresh me on the second part of your question?
I think you've covered most of it, Chief, if I'm not mistaken. I think the question might, sorry, Councillor Edgerton.
Yeah, to you, Mayor, to the fire chief. Do we need to get a letter from the councillors to go ahead to these guys that are making these rational decisions that we get rid of equipment that is still working well and doing the job first? Just because they have some regulation in the back of their head that the truck isn't capable of doing the job. If it's still past the road test and the pump test, why can't we keep them in service? Do you need something from the councils to push that?
I think as well on that point, Chief, just to interject, we have sent letters about a lot of the legislation that's been coming down and really disrupting, whether it's from training and certification. What you're finding, and I think what the consensus is around the province with smaller rural volunteer fire services, is that the province doesn't want you to have those anymore. And they're really doing everything slowly, gradually as they can to just, I think, without understanding the fiscal download of a full-time fire service for small municipalities, it's cost prohibitive, let alone the fact of, it's not cost prohibitive because you can raise the taxes to get it, but it's cost prohibitive for people to be able to afford the tax increases that you're going to have to change that rate. So we've sent letters, but Chief, to Councillor Edgerton's point, is maybe we could go back and see if this is something that's been a part of the advocacy, but I know, or I expect that there will be some conversations at Roma about some of these additional changes as well that's coming up in a few weeks. And I'd be happy to sort of, well, I know I'm going, I'm not sure about the rest of council, but that subject is usually something that is well discussed, or there's at least one or two different, I want to call them meetings or presentations about that. I'd be happy to look through that and see if there is opportunities and what other municipalities may have done, and maybe the clerk can look into if there's been other advocacy components to those sorts of life cycle fleet management for fire service that we can sort of echo and piggyback on from an advocacy standpoint, because it's always good to go with a group of people that are struggling with the same thing. But does that, Chief, does that make sense, or maybe you want to speak to any previous advocacy?
Through the mayor, to the rest of council, Mr. Mayor, I think you've summed that one up very well. We can definitely check. I know we have sent something in the past. It just not right off the top of my head, but I can probably on this topic, and I'm not sure how long ago, but it's always good to refresh it. And if our association of fire chiefs has something coming forward at our upcoming conference, I'll definitely bring it back forward. But I would echo your words with, I mentioned at the last council meeting that I attended, that when you get to your committees and you're in front of politicians, echo your sentiments that you so elegantly summed up a moment ago there.
I don't know, Chief, I'm not sure, but thank you for that. I'll take it because it's not always eloquent. Other questions, members of council? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to the chief, just curious because I wasn't involved with this before when the tenders went out back with last council. So at the new fire hall, if we ever get to use it, hopefully sometime soon, the use inside, like at the north facility, we have an underground tank that's filled basically by gravity. The water that we're going to dispense on fires at the out of the new fire hall, is it ran through the chlorination, or is it coming straight from the well there as fresh water? And how does that affect the water rates or whatever we might be paying for that situation?
Through the mayor to Councillor Burns. So the new fire station will hopefully be coming online. We're just working this week, putting on some of the finishing touches, and we're hoping that, I know that the EMS is in there as of today, and we're hoping to be in there in the next week or so. And we'll let you know when that's finalized. Staff's over there today, currently working feverishly to get it up and running. So we're nearing the finish line. In regards to the water, the building code's very clear. When we took out the building permit, there's an on-site fire hydrant that is on the property of the fire hall. There's also one on the Highlands as they're building that out to meet the requirements of the building code. So we're on town water inside the fire hall. All the water that we use within the fire hall is metered. And we get an invoice just like any other water user. I may not get it actually invoiced, but it's an interdepartmental charge, and it's all metered and used. And so we're using chlorinated water that's ran through the tower first and is meets all the regulations because we're within an urbanized center. Station 2, as you indicated, is on a well and septic, and there is a tank there underneath the station. It's 10,000 gallons, but it's only used for, I'm going to say, training purposes at this point, because 10,000 gallons with a 1250 pump, it's not, you're only going to get 2 tanker loads out of it, and it's useless. So we use it for training purposes at this point. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks for that, Chief. Other questions? Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair, it's somewhere else in my notes and we may get to it, but in case we don't, on one of the pages, it refers to the old fire hall down at the bottom on King Street moving forward when this one gets operational. The cost actually went up. I can't tell you the numbers right now yet, but and they were referring to it as storage. What are you speculating there on that budgeting?
We're just, while we're in the transition period, we just needed to delineate for the budgets, which, so you could see, so council could see the 2 facilities while we're doing those transitions, and until council makes the decisions on what they're going to do in the future with 52 King Street. So there's some operational costs with that station. We're going to turn everything down and try to keep it as low as possible and turn out all the lights and stuff, but there will be some costs this year to do that while we walk through that process of decommissioning the old center.
Follow?
Just on that topic, and I don't know whether it comes under fire or what, but where you have storage out behind the building now because of the construction that was going on for the last couple of years. That'll be phased out too, I'm guessing.
Those storage containers that you're currently looking at are the construction companies, and they will be leaving. I'm hoping will materialize. We were sitting here, I was looking at their construction trailer out here. I was hoping I'd see it be moving, but we're working on it.
Thanks for that, Chief. Other questions? If not, we'll move next to the next department. Why is my screen not moving? So roads and environmental services. Questions, members of council? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Drew, I'm trying to figure out where we're at with this upgrade to Frederick Street and the sidewalking and what's being planned there. How far into that are we committed at this point in time? Like, I know it's a crappy piece of road. I think it should be expanded and improved because it's a benefit to the fair, which is a benefit to the township, not just Millbrook. But I'm trying to figure out, it shows up a bunch of different places and I don't really know, is it moving forward or where are we at with the need or the timeline?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. Yes, Frederick Street is at its end of life for the road surface, as well as the water main on that road. In the water capital budget, you will see, like you mentioned, it's a couple different places, but there is money being carried to replace the water main because it is also nearing its end of life, which requires full replacement for that. In regard to the stage that we're at on that project, we are planning to do it with approval from council on the budget. We will do it in the summer of 2025. We are planning to start the design process with a consultant. Once budget is approved, we have had discussions internally for the project, and upon approval of the budget, we would continue moving along with it.
I would assume as well, just on that same note, that there would be consideration for the fair and not disrupting. Obviously, that's a big event. It's been, well documented, so we wouldn't want to probably commence that project before that event. Is that something that's been considered or a part of the plans moving forward?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to council, yes, we will keep that into consideration. It was similar for Main Street. We did, for that project, we did start a week before, but we would, because it is the main road going into the fairgrounds, we would delay until after the fair is completed before we really get into construction for that.
Thank you, Drew. Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair to Drew on that topic, is there discussion or hopefully discussion on making that possibly something almost similar to 4 lanes that would allow for parking to alleviate all the other problems we have down in Millbrook during the fair time? Is that even on the board as far as being looked at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne, we haven't considered putting 4 lanes in for parking. It would be the same similar cross section. We are discussing whether to continue with an urbanized, a rural cross section with the ditch drainage, or if it would be feasible to do an urbanized cross section with curb and gutter and better drainage underground, so it's not ditches. But in regards to widening the road, at this time, we would not be increasing the width.
Thanks, Drew. Follow up?
Yes, through the chair. So on that topic, I'd hate to see it be too urbanized, because the idea of putting curbs in there, maybe on the north side of the road to the property owners, to their boulevard, makes sense to me. The other side of the road, making it inflexible for people to park and still allow 2-way traffic through there, when I realize it only happens in a short time frame, usually in our calendar year. But it just seems foolish to me to put curbs on both sides of the road there and restrict what could possibly be an advantage to the fair.
Okay. Councilor Edgerton?
You, Mr. Mayor, Drew, I see about the 4th line down, pre-engineer cost, but it doesn't say what the 30,000 is for. And if we already have engineers on staff, why are we hiring engineers all through this year budget, engineers and consultants to do work like this?
Drew?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Edgerton. The pre-engineering cost budget line is utilized for projects similar to Frederick Street for the design of these certain projects, or if we need to bring a consultant engineer on to do any testing for specific projects. We do have that budget that is usable for a various amount of projects throughout the year. Regarding the comment about having engineers on staff, we do, Mr. Hancock is a professional engineer, but for these projects, they are very time consuming for the specific design of the projects, which is not feasible to do internal at this time. There are different jobs and tasks that we do tackle internal, which do require Mr. Hancock as an engineer. But like I said, the feasibility to do all of the engineering work internal at this time, we just wouldn't be able to make it work.
Thanks, Drew. Ms. Hurley?
If I may, Mr. Chairman, to council, just to add to that, it's important to note when you tender out works, you tender out companies to do and carry out those works. A company is not going to utilize our engineering staff and not their own staff. So it depends upon the work. We do all of our, for Mr. Hancock, he does review all the development plans and all of our subdivision plans, et cetera, along with Drew. But so we do save a lot of money for not having to go and outsource that. But when you come to a tender document, when you tender a document, you tender a full project. And that includes the construction, it includes the engineering, their insurance covers that. It's not something that you can break apart.
Thanks for that clarity, Ms. Hurley. Deputy Mayor?
Through you, Chair, I guess first comment on Frederick Street is wherever way it ends up, I hope we address the sogginess of the south side of that street and kind of clean that up a bit. And the second one is the roadside mower, and I know it's going to come forward in a subsequent report, but I'm still kind of scratching my head why we would be buying a lawnmower roadside. We already contract that service out, but I guess that's a debate for the next day when we see that report.
Is that report, do we know a date, Ms. Hurley? I don't want to put Drew on the spot. I don't know if it's January or February. Do we know when that's coming forward?
So through you, there is a section in the report that what we've brought forward for clarity, and again, Drew could speak to this probably better than I can. But what we've done is we can't determine exactly what amount of DCs will be utilized for that based on until we carry out our DC update. So the whole section talks about the use. It talks about what the rental costs are. It talks about the lifespan of the roads if you enhance all of that. So that section of that information's all in the report. So that's why, and Drew can add to that section, but it talks about we are explaining that there is a need to move forward towards this. Municipalities have in the past rented, and some are moving towards buying equipment, so the lifespan of the road enhances because of the amount of clearing that can be done, sight lines, etc. It also talks about the amount of traffic that we're having on the road. So the Public Works Department is proposing to go forward that, but they also want to take a pause, only allocate the 100,000 at this time so that we can update our DCs to see how much money we can draw on that. And then if we can, depending upon what that looks like, then we would take a report and have a better idea of what that cost would be. But we're still asking council for consideration to allow for the $100,000 to be put aside. Drew, I'm not sure if you'd like to add anything.
She stole a lot of the thunder. Okay, so because if I'm not mistaken, so we are updating the DC bylaw this year. And so this would be, so the inclusion of that and the final finishing of that bylaw will determine what might be eligible. And that will certainly provide a significant lens as to what we're getting into. I think the estimates were about 400,000 and change for certain machines, I think. And if I'm not mistaken, Drew, I think I asked this a few weeks ago, or maybe it was Wayne. I get the two of you confused, no offense. But in regards to this project, I think we spend about 30 to 40,000 annually on the contracting that service. So a $400,000 machine, if it's not funded through DCs, is the equivalent of 10 years of the contracted service without any, overtime, without wear and tear, without maintenance, without any of the breakdowns or things or replacements of headers or things like that. So it's definitely a report that I think council is going to look forward to. And as much as 100,000 is a significant placeholder, I mean, I think that's the debate we can have is we don't know what the DCs can accommodate or what might be eligible. I think it was alluded to that there may be in the realm of, 200,000 or thereabouts that might be eligible. So that changes a lot of the financial consideration. So I think the question for council is, are we good with 100,000 as a placeholder? Because that's a significant financial impact for a machine that we're not sure exactly how we're going to approach doing the work of the machine, I think is the easiest way to say it. Councillor Byrne.
Through the chair on that topic, I took the time back when the plowing match was on, to go out and look at that Mantis machine sitting over at Hub and took a walk through and talked to the guys. And what we're discussing is kind of apples to oranges, because the current thing that we're doing for the last several years is mowing a foot or two into the edge of the road to cut down the grass. And we've been told, because I used to come to meetings before I got elected, by people that build roads and repair roads, the road allowances are our responsibility. I found out very quickly when I started traveling around door knocking how badly the overgrowth has got on our road allowances. We've been told forever and ever, well, Ryan's been here the longest. If you don't brush back the road allowances, if you don't ditch the roads properly, you're wasting your money on road services. I'm not a big waster of money. I don't look at this, but I'm looking at it as two different items. Now, this particular past year, we got a different operator on the rental machinery, and we actually managed to clear about 3 feet of grass on the side of the road. But we're not getting the saplings and stuff. We've already got a piece of equipment that does a great job, but people get upset with it because we've let the overgrowth get so bad on the road allowances over the last 20 years or more that you're chopping down trees. And I agree, it looks brutal the first year. It needed to be done. It should have been done. It's never been done. But this type of machine is a different animal. It would actually allow that once we get caught up to where we should have been, that we actually maybe maintain it at a reasonable, quick, efficient use of things. So I don't have a problem with that episode if it helps anybody. I there's any questions. But on that topic, what I do notice, backhoe number 33-91 shows up as being replaced, but I can't find it in the Public Works document, that reference number. So I think it's the machine sitting down at the transfer station, but I don't know where we are in the Public Works as far as, is that the machine that we're talking about here on the capital S?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne, you are correct. That is the backhoe at the transfer station. The plan is right now to replace that machine, and we would replace it with the backhoe from the Public Works Center right now. So the transfer station backhoe does have a budget under the environmental section. So we would, sorry, I forget the number off the top of my head for the backhoe at the Public Works Center, but it would be transferred to environmental and be kept and used at the transfer station. And then the new backhoe would be at the operations center used by the Public Works Roads Department.
Thanks for that, Drew. Deputy Mayor, and then go back to Councilor Byrne.
To you, Chair. I wasn't quite finished with the roadside mower here. But I'm still struggling with this, like, because if we have a program in place where we're doing the ditching, you know, albeit aggressive and not well, and, you know, we bump up the 30,000 to double it to 60,000, we're still nowhere near $400,000. And it doesn't matter how much DCs you get to cover this machine on. As soon as that machine lands on our books, it becomes part of our asset replacement. Now we're putting away money again to replace this thing. Like I'm really struggling with how this one financially makes any sense. So I hope when this report comes forward, we see a much more clear breakdown of what the true long-term cost of this thing is. You know, DCs aside, like that's, to me, it's, you know, whether it's 400 or 200, you still have a long-term cost that you have to deal with this thing. Where are we getting that back compared to what, you know, the 30,000 seems ridiculously low to me for what we're doing today. Maybe the 30,000 goes up a little bit, but we will, as soon as we bring an asset on our books, we're paying for it for the rest of everybody's life. And that's, you know, maybe that's the position we want to be in, but it just ends up costing and costing and costing and costing. And I'll say my bit and I'll wait for your report.
We will look forward to that report for sure. Councilor Byrne, right?
Through the chair, it's not in this section, Drew, but it's some of the other documentation. I don't know how we're going to get to all this. I'd asked last year to find out how many graders do we actually own and operate at this point in time. When I was going through the notes, trying to figure out what's what.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne, we have one grader that we purchased in 2023. And then we have a tired excavator So, but to your question, yeah, we have one grader.
Yes, through the chair. So we sold one. I think we had a John Deere and a different Champion, I think maybe. Where does that show up in the bookkeeping as far as coming back as revenue when they got sold on gov.com or whatever it was?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. We did sell the John Deere grader on Gov Deals. When you're referring to where it comes back, I would have to refer to Ms. Pope.
Thank you. Just to clarify, it usually goes against the purchase of the new. So often when the budgeting is happening, when you see under other where we're financing it from, there's an estimate that the Director of Public Works is giving us what he thinks he's going to get back from Gov Deals. And that reduces the cost and then reduces the ask to the municipal taxpayer. So whenever we're replacing assets, we're using those funds to discount the cost, almost like a trade-in value, if you would.
So it would be a part, like just for example, with the sheet, it would be fall, those funds would come under the red, that second line and the second column, I guess I should say, not line, sorry, and into reserve and underfunding. When an item was purchased, right? Obviously, and that's no brainer there. Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair to Ms. Kimberly. So when is the reconciliation done? So you guesstimate what you might get in the used market. You guesstimate and hopefully get what you bid. But if the two don't line up or one is surplus and one is excess, how does that get reconciled?
Thank you. So normally we've been very close because usually there's a call out to Gov Deals and there's a calculation on the back end. So it's been very close. So we really haven't had that much. But when I talk about the $250,000 surplus that's in this budget, that's where it's rolled into to try to attribute where those funds would come from. Yeah.
Other questions, Councilor Byrne?
Through the chair. One question there, Drew. The new truck we ordered a couple of years ago that we're going to take delivery of, do we actually have it? Are we actually using it? Is it operational?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. The truck is still on order. We are expecting it to be delivered this spring, as the last we've heard, approximately March or April. There has been a bit of a delay. We did know it was going to be an extended delivery time. So we are hoping March or April of 2025.
Other questions with regards to road and environmental services? Councilor Byrne.
Through the chair, and this might not be yours, Drew, but over in wastewater and distribution centers, Frederick Street is getting an upgrade for water mains. That 450, that's on top of the other 400 and something thousand for the road work and on top of the sidewalk work that's planned. And the sidewalk is only planned for one side of the road, I'm guessing.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne. That is correct. The 450,000 is just for the water main and the work to go into installing it along that section of road. As I mentioned before, we are still in the design phase of the project. So I know currently the sidewalk halfway down the road is on the north side and the other half is on the south side. So we are looking at options to either move that to one side to make it more usable for the fair. But we are going through different options. I don't have a finalized one at this point, but that will come fairly soon, I'm hoping.
We've skipped ahead, but if we're done with, we can move on from roads and environmental if there's no other questions about that for now, or we can always come back, like I said, so. Any questions about the grant application document? We have, I think that's the first one before we get to water, wastewater. Any questions about any of those grants? I think I was looking at the one before. Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Mark. Not hearing anything. So the next would be water and wastewater. Any additional questions? I think Councillor Edgerton, I think you had a question with regards to water, wastewater. Is that correct?
See you, Mr. Mayor, there to Drew. I see in your water and wastewater here, you got a water rate study for 15,000 for the user fees. And the same thing, another 15,000 for the user's fees for the sewage. Would that not be, could staff not figure out whether we're making money or losing money without hiring consultants to do that kind of work? And the second question I have, I see a replacement of a portable generator for 100,000. What size of a generator are we looking at here?
So Drew, you want to take the generator one and then maybe Ms. Pope will take the financing one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Edgerton. Sorry, for the portable generator, we did budget for a full replacement of the generator. It is the generator that is utilized at the treatment plant when the power does go out, or at the pumps when the power is out in that area. The current generator is broken down, so we are trying to see if the part that's broken on it can be repaired. And if that's the case, then we would hopefully not need the full 100,000 for the generator replacement. But if it's not repairable, then we would need to utilize the full 100,000 to replace the generator.
Ms. Pope?
And in addition, the water wastewater study is actually $30,000 and it's split 50-50 between water and wastewater.
I think the question from Councillor Edgerton is what is the necessity that requires that study to be done not in-house?
That study, it actually establishes the 5-year horizon. So we have historically brought in the consultants to ensure that all the aspects are kept together. We've never tried to do that in-house. It's a pretty in-depth study and requires legislation, especially when it comes to the Safe Water Drinking Act and water wastewater user fees. So it's not one that we would want to bring in-house. Because of the expertise and the legislation that surrounds that. So we've always brought them in. It's a 5-year study and it's what establishes our rates and it allows us as a municipality to stand behind and know they work with all of our team, but it allows us to know that they are the correct and the most efficient rates that we can possibly provide to our residents for their water and wastewater.
Ms. Pope? Questions, Councillor Byrne?
Through the chair, I apologize. I wanted to ask Kimberly earlier, under the grants, the total capital request, that's just a little over $12 million. When I add up all the totals from the things we just went through for the last hour and a bit, it comes out to a little over 6 million. And I just want to figure out the difference, where that difference would be.
Thank you. These are the summary pages providing you the information, but if we go back up to the total keep going up to when we get to capital beginning and the summarize, go one more, right there. So when you're talking about the $12 million of the total capital requests, then it's how it's funded. So you have the rollovers and then the future year pre-approvals, bringing it down to the $10.9 million, and then finance through the different reserves, asset replacement, other funding and grant applications that are pending, bringing it down to the net capital. And that's the $4 million that we require in the municipal tax levy. So it's the addition of all the above.
Thanks for that, Ms. Pope. Other questions with regards to the grants? Okay, we've gone through sort of carte blanche. Is there anything that we want to go back over, any departments? It's also been about 2 hours. Does council want, we got a 5 o'clock meeting that Kimberly would like some time to get some of these changes incorporated into. What is council's, so let's keep, no problem. Go ahead, Councilor.
Through the chair, in the water distribution system, it talks about citywide maintenance manager. Is that a new position we're creating with the idea of getting away from the Peterborough utilities?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Byrne, that would be a software system that we would utilize when we do go internal with our own staff. And it's for the monitoring and maintenance of the internal systems. So that's basically all it is.
Okay, let's take a 2-minute break and then we'll try to wrap things up pretty quickly, just and go from there. All right, we'll now reconvene the meeting with regards to the discussion around the budget. We're going to try to give staff some time to make some adjustments, but I understand there's a couple of questions left and we want to have a bit of a discussion about where we're trying to get to as a council. So Councilor Byrne, is there an additional question you want to ask?
Please, through the chair. I just looking at, have we got final numbers for either the 4-bay building we put up at the Millbrook Works Yard or the operational center at downtown Cavan? The actual, there's estimates here. The budget was estimated, but I never saw any real numbers. And when I start looking at what's actually defined as funded, they didn't quite add up to what was the actual budget. So I just wonder where that all falls out.
Ms. Pope?
I don't have the exact report with me, but it was brought forward to council with all the itemized exactly how we funded it and where we funded it from. And when we were talking about the debentures, this is a summary of the project talking about what was estimated to be funded, but the actuals came in. Fire Station 1 is the only one that's not finalized. The others, they're not estimated. So I think you might be carrying the language down below because the Public Works Operations Center isn't estimated. The total for that project was that $3,089,631. And the debenture portion of that is the piece that's not yet clear. We're internally, during the construction phase, we funded it internally through the ARR. I brought forward a report late August, early September. And so that report is the one that's coming back with the other alternative options. But those ones were finalized. Those numbers are clear. It's just the fire ambulance. There's a future report to come forward on that one.
Thank you for that, Ms. Pope. So we have only an hour left before we have to recommence and reopen the public portion of the meeting, but I think it makes sense to have a bit of a general conversation now, and we can pick it up after we hear from members of the public about sort of where council would like to sort of reach or achieve with regards to the levy, because Ms. Pope has a little bit of work to do to get some updates done for the 5 o'clock meeting for the public, and then we'll hear from the public about their feedback. But maybe council wants to have a discussion, and then we can start to think about how we can achieve that. Obviously, as Councillor Byrne mentioned, we haven't talked about the reduction to the asset replacement reserve yet. That's usually something we save for later, and I think we should wait to see what the public has, if there's any impacts there, and then we can have that discussion. But does council want to have a brief discussion as to maybe each one of us can just go through and suggest, and I'm happy to go first if it just diffuses the ice breaking tension of going. But you know, with regard, we're still by my calculation in about with the 12,000 reduction, we're still in the 4.7 range. I'm committed to getting that very close to the 3% range is where I'm thinking personally. And I'll be thinking over the dinner break about how to accomplish that. But that's just my feedback. I don't know if any other members of council want to say it, but let's just sort of just to see where we're at and where we think is achievable, and then we can go from there. But anyone else like to? Councillor Edgerton, go ahead. We can go down the line.
You, Mr. Mayor, I think that we should be no higher than 3 on it if we could.
I would be happy if we could be somewhere in the 3s.
Through you, Chair, I have to agree. Like I'm thinking probably around 3.5 would probably be fair enough. Like I don't want to remove too much from the ARR. We run into that problem every year. We get that we can always pull from it, but we're always pulling from it. But yeah, there's a lot coming down. I mean, I know counties has a pretty big chunk. So it's a lot to bear, but we still have to function.
Through the chair, for me, I'm going to pick wounds off an old scab. But when I listen to people out in the community, I don't hear any big interest in a $5 million park in downtown Millbrook. Certainly not from the people that live in the township of Cavan or North Monaghan. And I just look at this moving forward on this as somewhat out of touch with what the concept or the community really wants as a whole. So yes, I'd like to see us spend less and give the same kind of value. I know that's difficult, but every other level of government is doing the same thing. They're talking about the high cost of living, and they're not doing anything about it. And I was going to ask Kimberly a question about Doug Ford and the the way the assessment goes out for impact, but we'll save that for another time. So the lower, the better for the people that I represent.
And just for clarity, there isn't $6 million in the budget for the park. It's not in there. I'm just, but we're trying to focus on, yeah, I got it. Okay, fair enough. So we'll, and obviously, I think Kimberly, I think we talked about this as well, but I think we do, if I'm not mistaken, the education, is it remaining the same? I think we're aware that it is staying the same for the education rate. And we do now know that the county is the tax rate is, but the 8.4% is the tax levy increase. So pick whichever number that you want for that number, but we do know those two. So is there an opportunity to maybe update that graph as to if we stay at wherever we are now before doing any ARR stuff, like a 4.7 or whatever we are with the 12,000 we reduced it by? Can we guesstimate in that update in that what the implications are? Because as one of the individuals said when they came up, like we only have control over our portion. And I know that the deputy mayor and I were quite disappointed with the county increase and rushing that through without more, I would say, stringent and focused due diligence on actually cutting the expenditures. But we were overruled, and so we're bound by that. But that is a significant increase that the taxpayers are going to be inheriting on the 30% of the county portion. So if we can, with the public in attendance, if we can extrapolate that, I would be very interested in seeing what that looks like with updated information with the 4.71 where we are now. If possible, I'm not going to hold you to it, just my preference, but on you don't have to respond. If it's possible, great. If it isn't, I accept that and we'll move on and worry about that later.
Okay, so through you, Mayor, the other two components of the bill, so you're trying to see what the impact of all three components will have on the public. The education staying the same, of course, like that's easy. County's different though, because the county, just because they've proposed an increased rate, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the residential tax rate increase. And how can I levy that to show that until they release to me the tax rates? And the county hasn't released the tax rates to me. So I'd be speaking on their behalf and trying to make some assumptions, which I would be uncomfortable with. But as far as our portion, our 58% portion, we are in full control of that and can make whatever changes and speak to that. But I wouldn't speak on behalf of the county at this point. No.
No problem. Maybe we can just allude to that they have passed the budget, that it's not waiting. We just don't know how it factors into this graph yet, but just to get it out there, but that's great. Great. Well, thanks for that, Council. Good start to this budget process. Glad everyone's here today and we can get through a lot of the work. So with regards to a motion right now, I think we can just receive that staff, make the changes passed, and that bring an updated report to tonight's public meeting at 5 p.m. That would be the motion. Moved by Councillor Natchoff, seconded by Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. Lastly, I got a few components that, Ms. Page. Oh, sorry.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, can I just clarify with Ms. Pope that that is okay? And do you need us to clarify that motion? Just read nice.
Thank you. Just one point of clarification. So when you were talking about the $12,000 reduction, I have an $11,000 reduction because I've got Station Park sign, $7,000 removed. I've got Butterfly Project, $5,000 removed, but we added back $1,000. So I just want to make sure that's the three components that I have coming forward to the budget this evening. Right. Well, the one was removing the 5,000 and adding the 1,000 into operations. Yeah. Okay.
I don't think we actually. The direction was to just reduce the 5,000 to 4,000, or sorry, to 1,000 in the capital, not to move it to operating at all. Thank you. So that was the direction. And then the other direction was to remove the 7,000 request for the sign. That's what Ms. Hurley, would you like to clarify?
I think where we're going with that at a step. Yep. Okay. Through you, Chair, I think the concern that we have is when we deal with capital, our capitals are at a higher expenditure. It's not necessarily if we're doing a sign or potentially multiple signs for $1,000 or something like that, it's quite normal for us to move that $1,000 into an operating expenditure. So I think what we're trying to do is our thresholds usually are anywhere between 5,000 and up when it comes to capital. So therefore, if Ms. Pope that's where Ms. Pope is going with this, it's good that our clerk has asked for clarification because I don't think that's the intention or what needs to be done. So you're okay?
Well, I'm going to ask council if I'm okay. So is council amenable then that it would be a removal of the 5,000 and that the operational budget would be increased for the signage project? The same thing's happening. It's just, it's not going to be in the capital budget anymore. The operational will be increased by 1,000. Do we need a mover for that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the rest of council and yourself, as long as the mover and the seconder of that motion agree with that amendment, your mover was Deputy Mayor Huntley and your seconder was Councillor Edgerton.
Both are fine as amended. Okay. I think then I have just a few more confirming bylaw, that bylaw number 2025-01 being a bylaw to confirm the proceeding of the special meeting held January 9th, 2025 at 1 p.m. Be read a first, second, third time and passed this 9th day of January, signed by the mayor and the clerk and the corporate seal attached thereto, moved by Councillor Edgerton and Councillor Natchoff. All in favor? That is approved. Lastly, motion to adjourn the special meeting, moved by Councillor Edgerton and Deputy Mayor Huntley. All in favor? That is approved. We will see you and members of the public at 5.